Chapter 2375. All the spectating living beings felt like Cyril had a massive advantage. Only Cyril knew that he had no advantage whatsoever. He was at a complete disadvantage. However, Cyril had battled the heavens, the earth, and even the air. Who had he ever been afraid of? The more powerful his enemies were, the more battle intent he had. Cyril raised the light demon Tao sword in his hand again, and a vast demonic aura flowed along the blade of the sword as a peerless battle intent began to proliferate outward. The light goddess raised her head and smirked as she sensed the extremely terrifying might. Your sword Tao is indeed the most powerful sword in this world. Cyril was a little surprised to receive the light goddess affirmation. However, you are still under the heavens, and I am the heavens. No matter what, you can only be below me, the light goddess said in an indifferent voice. Cyril took a deep breath. These words had enraged him quite a bit. Everyone else was also dumbstruck upon hearing this. The light goddess sure was arrogant. Her level of mockery was already maxed out. Who knew if her combat prowess could compare with her? You don't seem to be convinced? So be it. The heavenly light goddess shook her head and pressed a hand to her heart. A halo of light appeared over her heart, and she inserted her slender fingers into the halo of light before slowly pulling out a long sword. Let me show you what is a sword from the heavens. Whoosh! A ripple of sword Tao instantly spread throughout heaven and earth. Even Cyril's light demon Tao sword was struck by the ripple of sword Tao. Cyril's movements faltered slightly. He could sense the ripple of sword Tao, and he felt as if he could see a boundless world crashing down upon him. All the spectating living beings widened their eyes. Some were entranced, while others were horrified. What kind of sword was this? It seemed to be the embodiment of all the beauty of this world, as well as all the sins and horrors of this world. The blade of the sword in the heavenly light goddess's hand was transparent. However, upon closer inspection, one could see all things within the sword, as well as the boundless opportunities of creation. Upon closer inspection, one could even see the devastation and despair of the world's destruction. What on earth is this? Cyril was on full alert. The sword struck him with extreme danger, and this danger instantly enveloped his entire body. This sword is known as the sword fragment of the heavenly Tao. The heavenly light goddess said indifferently. Cyril's heart jolted upon hearing this. This was the secret weapon of the heavenly light goddess that Enlin had told him about, the damaged sword of the heavenly Tao. Was this the sword that Enlin had faced in the ancient Tai Chu realm? Just what kind of monster was he fighting against? Extreme sword Tao true intent started to spread out, and many smooth sword scars started to appear on the ground and the void. The powerful sword light even suppressed the sword prowess of the glorious demon Tao sword. But at this moment, the two swords could barely be considered to be on par with each other, until the goddess of light's pure and flawless primordial light fused with the broken sword of the heavenly way. It was as if destruction welcomed hope and withered welcomed rebirth. The broken sword was no longer broken. Boom! The terrifying sword intent soared into the 9 heavens. The demonic sword intent of the glorious demon Tao sword was completely suppressed by the sword in the goddess of light's hand. Regardless of where one was on the Tai Chu continent, one could sense an unprecedented burst of sword intent. Looking up toward the Purple Star ruins, one could even see a mighty sword that connected heaven and earth. A sword constructed from the heavenly Tao. A sword was a paramount heavenly Tao. Not to mention, this was the heavenly Tao of the ancient Tai Chu realm, the predecessor of the Tai Chu continent. Cyril's flesh crawled with fear. Chun Chun was destroying the heavenly Tao of the Tai Chu continent, but Cyril, was now responsible for dealing with the heavenly Tao of the ancient Tai Chu realm. Most importantly, the heavenly Tao of the Tai Chu continent was extremely damaged, but the heavenly Tao of the ancient Tai Chu realm was not damaged. Instead, it had transformed all of its power into a ferocious warrior. Its backer was the paramount heavenly god of the Tai Chu continent's heavenly Tao. In other words, Cyril, had to face the combined power of the ancient Tai Chu continent and the ancient Tai Chu realm. The radiant goddess raised the broken sword of heavenly Tao in her hand. The primordial light perfectly fused with the broken sword of heavenly Tao, forming a contradictory unity of completeness and fragmentation, destruction and rebirth, despair and hope. This made the level of the sword even more terrifying. You said your sword could blot out the sky. Can it keep my sword at bay? The goddess of light's sword fell upon Cyril, and heaven and earth instantly changed color. Cyril's essential power burned explosively as demonic flames incinerated the sky for over 90,000 kilometers. All of the essential power within his body surged into the blade of the sword in a frenzy, and his arms bulged like a series of massive divine mountains as he slashed his sword toward the goddess of light. At this moment, not only was he burning his blood essence, but he was also burning his essential power and Tao for the sake of his next sword strike. True demon sacrifice, sword of the heavenly Tao. The power of the light, demonic Tao sword in Cyril's hand soared to its peak once again. Aside from the damaged sword of the heavenly Tao, a demonic sword also appeared before the eyes of all living beings on the Tai Chu continent. The damaged sword of the heavenly Tao and the light demonic Tao sword were the two most powerful swords in the history of the Tai Chu continent, and they clashed at this moment. What a coincidence! The sword of the heavenly Tao that Cyril was using was specifically designed to sever the heavenly Tao. The sword in the heavenly light goddess hand just so happened to be the heavenly Tao. This was the final showdown between the heavenly Tao and the heaven-crushing sect. The heavenly Tao crashed down with boundless sword intent, and a true demon roared as it rose into the sky with its sword, unleashing a peerless demonic might capable of destroying the heavenly Tao. The entire world seemed to have frozen at this moment. The 4-9 immortal sect, Niwa, the heavenly lord of Tao and virtue, the dying life goddess, and Lin, and countless other living beings were watching. The sound of the wrath of the heavens and the demonic roar also erupted throughout the boundless Tai Chu continent like divine thunder. The light of the heavenly Tao shone in the east, even brighter than the sun. Monstrous demonic intent engulfed heaven and earth before crashing into the Tai Chu continent. The two powers clashed in a frenzy. All of the living beings were getting quite nervous. The outcome of this battle was going to affect their fates to a very large extent. The battling Buddha finally arrived at the Purple Star ruins, and he could see the battle between the light goddess and Cyril from afar. However, he didn't even get a chance to do anything before he was blasted flying by the terrifying shockwaves from the clash. The battling Buddha crashed to the ground, and he could only just barely stand up after unleashing his power of the divine Tao. He could sense that even the laws and the great Tao of heaven and earth had been blasted into nothingness, let alone the space around him. What kind of battle is this? The battling Buddha's battle intent had just been ignited, but it had been completely obliterated by that clash. He knew that he was quite powerful, but if he was at the epicenter of the clash, the light goddess wouldn't even need to do anything. Just the shockwaves alone would be enough to crush him into nothingness. Who's going to win? The battling Buddha looked on with a tense expression. The earth-shattering energy battle reached its climax. Cracks began to appear on the heavenly Tao sword in the sky as a massive gash was torn open by the heaven-crushing power. However, the boundless absolute origin light was disintegrating the heavenly Tao sword at an even faster rate. Even though the true demon essential power was boundless, it was still limited. In contrast, the absolute origin light was boundless, and it quickly engulfed the true demon essential power. In the end, both the sky and the earth were transformed into a sea of absolute origin light. Chapter 2376. In the eastern region of the Tai Chu continent, the peerlessly domineering, essential demonic energy and the supreme sword intent of the Ao Ju continent were both engulfed by the boundless sea of light. This scene caused the hearts of all living beings to fall to the bottom of the valley. They all knew what this meant. Cyril had most likely already been defeated. Michael's expression was filled with incredulity. He's the most powerful man in the heaven-crushing sect. Is he really going to be defeated? A white-robed woman was flying through the air. She looked at the explosion that was right in front of her and released a strange multi-dimensional light barrier to block the shock waves of the explosion. The two dragons curled up into a ball within the light barrier. The bright red head on the black-robed woman's head swayed rapidly. Cyril has been defeated. The white-robed woman revealed her intricate features, and her voice was filled with a hint of regret and solemnity. She was the pavilion lord of the 4-9 immortal sect's Purple Star Pavilion. Didn't you say that he's the most powerful god of creation on the Tai-Chu continent? If even he has been defeated, then who else can stop the heavenly light goddess? Xiao Zhe trembled as he looked at the terrifying sea of light before him. Bai Ling turned to Xiao Zhe with a faint smile. Don't forget who your master is. He hasn't even made a move yet, and you're already scared? That's right. My master is invincible. Yi Ling spoke with a firm expression. She was the most resolute of the three braggers of the 4-9 immortal sect. Xiao Zhe hung his head in shame upon hearing this. I'm sorry, I doubted Master's power. I'm such a failure as a disciple. Hasn't Master created enough miracles? I'm sure he'll be able to create another miracle this time. Xiao Tu had once been tricked into becoming Enlin's disciple, and he was extremely proud of the fact that he had Enlin as his master. Xiao Zhe looked up into the sky and sighed with emotion. It looked like among his three disciples, he was the only one who wasn't smart enough. To think that he doubted Enlin's ability to defeat Enlin. After Master absorbs the power of Tao from the three paramount heavenly gods, his power will definitely increase by leaps and bounds. When that time comes, no matter how powerful the heavenly light goddess is, she'll still be able to defeat him. Yi Ling hurried toward the heaven-crushing sex base as she observed the battle taking place in the White Nectar Sea. At this moment, Enlin had already stabbed his evil-slaying sword into the life goddess chest, and the final Tao sword was already quickly tearing apart and absorbing the power of Tao from the paramount god of life. Perhaps it was due to the fact that Cyril was at a disadvantage, but Enlin's absorption of Tao power had become a lot faster. He already had the urge to speed up at all costs. The supreme authority of the life goddess had already collapsed, and her aura was quickly disappearing. Blood had already seeped out of the corner of her mouth, and her chest had been invaded by darkness. However, her pair of orange-red eyes that were like the setting sun grew brighter and brighter, appearing especially poignant and beautiful. Of course, Enlin wasn't the type to go easy on the fair sex. In order to prevent the life goddess from coming back to life again, he even slung Tina over his shoulder as a protective talisman. Su Xiaolan, Shangguan Yi, and the other gods of creation had also used their absolute power to restrict the movements of the other two paramount heavenly gods. He, give up, Enlin, the life goddess chuckled mockingly. Even if you kill me, there's no way you'll be a match for the light goddess. Do you think that becoming more powerful will be enough to change the situation? You won't be able to win. Look at yourself. How many heavenly gods' power of Tao have you absorbed? You haven't even improved in power. So how are you going to oppose the light of absolute beginning? Even though you've created many miracles, you still lost the final battle, and it was a complete and utter defeat. I really pity you. You've already worked so hard. The life goddess continued to verbally attack Enlin. Enlin smiled in response, and a hint of gratitude appeared on his face. Gasp! Your power of Tao is so abundant. I feel so comfortable. I feel like my power is recovering, and my power of Tao is becoming more powerful. Thank you, life goddess. The life goddess voice faltered before a cold smile appeared on her face. So what if your power of Tao has recovered? So what if your power of Tao has become more powerful? You still won't be able to defeat the light of absolute beginning. An expression of enjoyment appeared on Enlin's face. I feel so good. The life goddess gritted her teeth. You can only be happy now. The final battle will be your time of pain and despair. Enlin looked at the life goddess with an extremely grateful expression. I feel so good. Enlin, What else can you say? The life goddess exploded with tears in her eyes. I feel so good. I know you feel so good. I'm going to kill you. She tried to move, but the evil-slaying sword held her firmly in place. And Lin continued to absorb the life goddess power of Tao in a frenzy and became more powerful. I feel so good, and Lin continued. The life goddess was in despair, and tears flowed down her cheeks uncontrollably. Humiliation. This method of defeat was far too humiliating. And Lin was indeed very comfortable. He was indeed very grateful to the life goddess. Thanks to the life goddess, he felt that his power had almost recovered to its peak state, and his power of Tao was growing at an extremely terrifying rate. The darkness within his body surged with extreme intensity and depth, gradually growing from a small lake to a large lake. He even felt like he was about to step into the vast ocean. The power of Tao of a paramount heavenly god was on a completely different level from the power of Tao of a normal heavenly god. The speed at which Enlin was becoming more powerful was also on a completely different level from before. It was also at this moment that he felt that his cultivation base was starting to loosen. Could it be? Enlin's eyes gradually lit up. He continued to absorb the life goddess power of Tao. Finally, when the darkness reached a certain limit, Enlin took a deep breath toward the life goddess, and the divine halo of life suddenly exploded, turning into countless beautiful particles of light. At the same time, with a crack, Enlin broke through some kind of shackle, and his cultivation base made a further breakthrough. His aura suddenly soared. I don't want to. I really don't want to. The life goddess felt that her life was rapidly slipping away, and she was about to die. She bit her lip so hard that it bled, and her beautiful dreamy face was full of grievance and unwillingness. Especially when she saw Enlin's smug and comfortable smile, she felt even more wronged. Life goddess, thank you. Thanks to you, I broke through. I don't know if I can beat light, but I really feel good. Enlin had a grateful look on his face. The life goddess, the woman's eyes trembled slightly, and tears flowed down her cheeks. She knew that no matter what she said now, it would only be futile and useless. The more she said, the more furious she became. The happier that freaking Lin would be. A series of cracks began to appear on the woman's perfect body. At the last moment of her life, the grievance and unwillingness of the life goddess gradually disappeared in the face of death. Instead, there was a sense of peace in the face of death. Enlin, I've lost this battle. The life goddess closed her eyes as she spoke in a faint voice. Don't be my enemy in your next life. Enlin chuckled. The life goddess' lips twitched, and she was about to say something. Bam! A loud explosion erupted. The life goddess exploded into a gorgeous rain of flowers that fell to the ground. The rain of flowers merged into the ground, and the extreme life force within them instantly revitalized the land within a radius of hundreds of thousands of kilometers, turning it into a green field of flowers. The fragrance of flowers wafted for millions of kilometers, and immortal butterflies fluttered endlessly, making all living beings feel as if they were in a paradise. Enlin slowly put down the evil-slaying sword in his hand with a complex expression on his face. The life goddess had finally fallen. Chapter 2377. Life. The heavenly heaven god looked at its collapsing body with a hint of grief and empathy on its face. They were unable to escape death in the end. It's over. It's all over. The heavenly sea god also shook his head relentlessly. Even though he had no facial features, his face was filled with remorse. However, Enlin didn't have time to pay attention to that. Extreme and pure darkness was spreading through the heavens. The monarch of darkness was awakening and becoming more powerful. Extremely terrifying and pure darkness spread without end, engulfing all things in its path. This kind of dangerous and eternal darkness made even the gods of creation's scalps tingle with fear. They knew that Enlin had made a breakthrough, but they didn't think that Enlin's darkness would become so much more terrifying. I feel like my entire consciousness is being sucked into the darkness just by looking at it. What kind of power is this? The three living beings were extremely proud of their spiritual power, but in the face of the darkness spreading through the heavens, they were struck by a sense of panic, as if they were afraid that their consciousness would be engulfed by the darkness. I can do it. I can definitely do it this time. I've become so powerful after absorbing the Tao power of a paramount heavenly god. If I absorb two more, I'll definitely be able to contend with the light goddess. Patriarch Zhu Yin spoke with an excited expression. He had already chosen a side, so he had to bear the consequences of his defeat. When the light goddess displayed her invincible combat prowess, he regretted his decision. Why did he have to make an enemy out of a heavenly god? Wasn't he just trying to die? However, hope was reignited in his heart at the sight of Enlin's power. Enlin officially progressed to the Tao integration final stage, and the phenomena between heaven and earth continued. The spreading darkness seemed to be announcing who was the ruler of this world. Phew! Enlin heaved a long sigh of relief. A joyful smile appeared on his face as he sensed the power of darkness within his body. He was now more than twice as powerful as he had been at his peak. He had already completely absorbed the paramount heavenly life god's power of life. This was the first time Enlin had absorbed a paramount heavenly god's power. After fusing with the supreme authority of darkness and life, not only did the darkness become stronger, it even underwent some strange transformations. The most obvious effect was that the power of Tao was amplified to the point where it was comparable to the power of several life goddesses. This path is indeed correct, Enlin muttered to himself. The moment he learned that he could not interrupt the transformation of the goddess of light, he thought of this solution. Since he could not stop the enemy from becoming stronger, he would choose to become stronger himself. While the radiant goddess was undergoing her transformation, he would first absorb the powers of the other three heavenly gods. That way, he wouldn't have to fear the radiant goddess after her transformation. However, things didn't quite go as planned. The radiant goddess broke out of her shell first. If it weren't for the fact that the heaven-crushing sect was in its final stages and had taken some of the pressure off of the radiant goddess, Enlin might have already been defeated. Sometimes things were just that wonderful. Although the process wasn't as expected, the result that Enlin wanted was finally a little closer. With this in mind, Enlin turned toward the heavenly sea god and the heavenly heaven god as an inky black divine light glowed from his evil-slaying sword. There were two more. The heavenly sea god's heart jolted upon hearing this, and an elated smile suddenly appeared on his face as he chortled with glee. "Ha ha! Brother Enlin, we really put on a good show. Now that the heavenly life goddess and the heavenly heaven god are unable to stir up any more trouble, it's time for me to admit my identity." Enlin's footsteps faltered. The rest of the spectating experts were stunned as well, and their faces were filled with shock. Brother Enlin? Admit his identity? A bold speculation surfaced in their minds at the same time. Could it be the heavenly sea god was actually sect leader Enlin's subordinate? The heavenly sea god laughed heartily. "Don't you know how the heavenly earth god died? He was killed by me and Enlin. Do you know how Enlin discovered the 1 billion heavenly human eggs? I divulged information about the heavenly human eggs to Enlin, and that was how that battle that was filled with coincidences unfolded. Do you think that's a coincidence in this world? You're wrong. Most of the coincidences are man-made. There aren't that many coincidences in this world." The heavenly sea god said. Even the heavenly heaven god was astonished upon hearing this. His eyes widened with incredulity as he stared at the heavenly sea god. "Heavenly sea god, you didn't tell me about the 1 billion heavenly human eggs. Could it be that this was all part of your and Enlin's plan?" "That's right. I'm telling you." The heavenly sea god admitted. "Do you think I betrayed light and earth and allied with your ocean of life? You're wrong. My true ally is..." The blue water being pointed at the white-robed man with a proud expression. Brother Enlin. Everyone fell deathly silent. The heavenly heaven god was still a little perplexed. "No, that's not right. You clearly wanted to kill Enlin during that battle at the White Nectar Sea." The heavenly sea god harumphed coldly. Who do you think forced you to reveal your true Tao form? The heavenly heaven god's body shuddered upon recalling that trident. Furthermore, I only attacked Lin because I had no other choice. I could only put on a show for all of you to see. Furthermore, I believe that Brother Lin has a backup plan. If he dares to come to the White Nectar Sea, then he must have a backup plan. Isn't that the case? The heavenly sea god turned to Tina with a gratified and approving expression as he spoke. Lin was astonished. This heavenly sea god was making up stories? The heavenly heaven god was struck by an unimaginable sense of shock, and he clasped a hand over his chest as he struggled to breathe. So, he had been toyed with by the heavenly sea and Lin this entire time? This ocean god was hiding his true colors. See, you traitor, you're a disgrace to the heavenly Tao. The heavenly heaven god cursed as he pointed at the heavenly sea god's face. The heavenly sea god became even more elated upon seeing the heavenly heaven god's insults, and he turned to Lin. Brother Lin, I've already completed my mission. You don't mind if I lay my cards on the table now, do you? Lin made his way over to the heavenly sea god and patted his shoulder before shaking his head with a smile. I don't mind. Brother C, this is the perfect time to lay my cards on the table. Thank you for everything you've done for me. The heavenly sea god chuckled heartily. We're all pursuing our own goals, so I'm glad that Brother Lin can understand my efforts. From now on, I'll do everything in my power to help Brother Lin so that he can secure the final victory. Rip! The black sword suddenly punctured the heavenly sea god's heart. Terrifying black Tao patterns began to spread over the heavenly sea god's body. I'm lacking power right now, so please do me one last favor and make me more powerful, Brother C. Thank you, Brother C. And Lin stabbed his evil-slaying sword into the heavenly sea god's chest. Chapter 2378. And Lin's sudden slash at his brother shocked everyone once again. What the hell was going on? Blood trickled down the heavenly sea god's lips as he turned to Lin in confusion. Why? What are you doing? Brother, don't think of me as an idiot. And Lin shook his head with a resigned expression. However, a look of approval then appeared on his face. Truth be told, among all of the paramount heavenly gods, you're the one I admire the most. You're not that powerful, but you're the most ambitious. You've indeed deceived a few paramount heavenly gods and drastically changed the power structure of the paramount heavenly gods. You're definitely the most audacious. Even in the face of defeat, you didn't give up on the opportunity. Instead, you chose to expose yourself in an attempt to convince me and the people around me. If it weren't for the fact that I've seen through you, I would have almost been convinced by you. I have to admit, you're really impressive. And Lin gave the heavenly sea god a thumbs up, but his sword continued to mercilessly engulf the paramount heavenly god of the sea. The heavenly sea god shook his head relentlessly. No. And Lin, have you forgotten about our collaboration? Don't you want to withdraw your heavenly god of darkness? That the bomb you're talking about? Su Xiaolan's expression shifted slightly upon hearing this. There's no need for you to worry about that, and Lin replied calmly. I'm the only one who can help you. We're mutually beneficial. As long as I become the true heavens, your goal will be achieved. I'm the only one who can help you. The heavenly sea god yelled as he sensed his power of Tao rapidly depleting. All of the mighty figures were astonished upon hearing this. It turned out that the heavenly sea god wanted to become a complete heaven. This goal sounded absolutely absurd. If the heavenly sea god really succeeded, just thinking about it sent chills running down their spines. The heavenly heaven god was the most astonished. He finally understood everything. He finally understood why the heavenly sea god and Lin were working together. Even if they didn't work together to the very end, they had definitely worked together in the past. The heavenly heaven god had prided himself on being invincible in divination, but who would have thought that he would be screwed over so miserably? Of course, the heavenly earth god and the heavenly life god were even more pitiful. They had been screwed over to the point where they didn't even know how they died. The heavenly sea god's words had no effect on Lin. The power of vanquish the heavens and slay all evil, and evil completely tore apart and engulfed the sea divine halo, and the heavenly sea god's body also began to crumble. And no, an indignant expression appeared on the heavenly sea god's face as he shook his head relentlessly. "Enlin, I'm begging you, please don't kill me. I still have many things to do. I still have many plans that I haven't realized. I don't want to die," and Lin remained completely unmoved no matter what the heavenly sea god said. "Goodbye, Brother Ocean." A brilliant black light erupted from Lin's evil-slaying sword as it instantly engulfed the heavenly sea god's body. An unimaginably vast power of the ocean surged into Lin's body in a frenzy, making his dark Tao power surge violently, as if it were going to engulf the entire world in the next instant. Gods of creation like flowing gold and black stone were already struck by an extremely terrifying sense of pressure, and all of them wanted to flee from this place. This was an instinctive reaction. They were struck by an instinctive sense of fear, and they instinctively wanted to surrender. As for all of the spectating living beings, they were also extremely excited and fearful. Fear was an instinctive reaction, while happiness and excitement were subjective emotions. They firmly believed that Enlin was on their side, so all of them were ecstatic to see Enlin becoming more powerful, and the scorching light in their eyes was a clear manifestation of their emotions. War God Enlin is still becoming more powerful. Didn't he just progress to the Tao integration final stage? He can continue to become more powerful even without stabilizing his cultivation base. Can a normal person absorb the paramount Tao power of the heavenly gods? Don't judge our Tai Chu continent's #1 war god by normal standards. Even Cyril has been defeated. He's the last hope of our heaven-crushing united army. He has to win. Some were sighing in praise, while others were praying. At this point, Enlin had already absorbed all of the paramount Tao power of the heavenly sea god. The once all-powerful heavenly sea god had finally fallen. Enlin, who had become even more powerful, turned his eyes toward the heavenly heaven god. The heavenly heaven god shuddered. It discovered that it was no longer able to see through Enlin. Enlin's current power of darkness was like a completely different thing from the paramount heavenly gods that it possessed. Sigh. The heavenly heaven god heaved a faint sigh. The elderly man's expression gradually returned to normal, and he didn't hurl abuse or beg for mercy. He merely looked at Enlin and accepted everything with a calm expression. Enlin was naturally not going to waste any words. He immediately plunged his evil-slaying sword into the heavenly heaven god's body and unleashed his vanquish the heavens, slay all evil, and end Tao. The gargantuan power of heaven fused with the power of darkness, and the power of darkness continued to grow at a rate discernible to the naked eye. Before they knew it, darkness had already spread over the entire white nectar sea and the surrounding sky, and it was still spreading at a rapid rate. It was clearly daytime on the Tai Chu continent, but all of the living beings were unable to see any light, as if they had been plunged into boundless darkness. Enlin's cultivation base was also climbing at a rapid rate, and no one knew what level it was going to reach. The power of darkness was extremely terrifying, and it seemed to be able to engulf all things and end all things. However, all of the living beings were feeling extremely reassured at the same time. They knew that this power belonged to Enlin. Gradually, Enlin's cultivation base had already reached the pinnacle of the Tao integration stage. As the darkness continued to grow, it seemed to be undergoing some sort of transformation. It was an indescribable transformation, as if something had changed. All of the living beings looked into the darkness, and they felt as if they had seen something eternal, as if they had seen the pinnacle of Tao. For some reason, they were struck by an indescribable sense of enlightenment. The darkness had always been like this, but Enlin had lifted the veil for them. At this moment, Enlin was still becoming more powerful. Enlin's cultivation base is still increasing, and so is his power of Tao. Is there no limit to his power? He's clearly already so powerful. Lu Jin's eyes widened. He's not going to create a world in one go, is he? Blackstone murmured. Haha, he can already thrash the three paramount beings at the Tao integration stage. If he can create a world in one go, then wouldn't he be able to thrash even light? The three creatures giggled as they spoke. Their 6 large eyes stared fixedly, clearly filled with anticipation. In contrast, Lord Luya shook his head with a wide smile as he stroked his translucent antlers. What a pity! Lin won't be able to create a world in one go. He is the highest heaven to begin with. Chapter 2379. Lin was getting used to the surge of power in his body. He could feel that the darkness had completely fused with him. Furthermore, the darkness was no longer the same darkness as before. The current darkness had undergone some sort of transformation, becoming truly eternal and indestructible, capable of ending everything. The fusion of the 3 utmost existences like D, E could dispel his darkness authority power and severely suppress Lin's strength. Now, if D, E appeared before him again, he was confident that he could use the darkness to devour D, E cleanly and end the battle in a second. Fellow Taoist Lin. A warm and friendly voice was heard. Lin turned around and saw Taoist Lord Luya riding the 9-colored deer over. He squinted his eyes and smiled. Fellow Taoist Luya. At that moment, the 9-colored deer felt as if it could see the darkness behind and Lin surging into the form of a demon that could devour everything at any time. Even though it was an ethereal and unfathomable creature, it was still trembling in fear at this moment, and even its moving legs became stiff. Taoist Lord Luya wiped the cold sweat off his forehead. A friendly smile appeared on his handsome face as he frantically tried to get closer to Lin. Fellow Taoist Lin, I've been waiting for this moment for a long time. Listen to my explanation. You must listen to my explanation. Who are you talking to? You don't have to be so nervous, Lin said with a chuckle. Taoist Lord Luya tidied up his flowery clothes and mumbled in his heart, It doesn't matter who I'm with, as long as it's not my brother. He had seen the entire process of Lin stabbing the Ocean Brothers' chests with his sword. This Lin was not to be trifled with, especially now that Lin had become even stronger than him. If he really angered Lin and Su Xiaolan joined forces to attack him, he would not be able to escape. Sigh, it's only been a blink of an eye. How did that adorable pretty boy from back then become so powerful? Lord Luya released a colorful barrier of light to isolate the two of them from the outside world. Clearly, he felt that it was inconvenient for too many people to know what they were going to say next. Lin did not mind. Lord Luya chose his words carefully before saying, Let's talk about the first one first. Actually, our meeting wasn't a coincidence. Lin blinked his eyes and recalled the old man's loving expression. Now, he felt that it was super wretched. He couldn't help but nod. I didn't notice that. Actually, the reason I ran into you was to give you the God of War system. Lord Luya continued. What exactly is this God of War system? I remember that accepting the system requires the aptitude of Tianming Dao. I have the Tianming Dao constitution, but so do you and the Ninth Arch. Why did you give this to me? Also, who created it? Lin voiced out the biggest confusion in his heart. Actually, the creator of the war god system is Lord Luya glanced at Lin and said meaningfully, Heavenly Darkness God. Lin was stunned. He felt like his mind was about to explode. The Heavenly Darkness God created this awakening process in order for his reincarnated self to successfully awaken the power of darkness. In order to make it easier for you to understand it, he called it the system. Lord Luya said. Lin was completely dumbfounded. This thing was created by the Heavenly Darkness God? I tricked myself. No, wait, why would I create such a thing? I tricked myself. Lin's eyes widened. Lord Luya revealed a contemplative expression. Those things that seem like a trap are actually an opportunity for you to awaken your power step by step. Eating the secretions of the mountain soul? Trying to please thousands of fairies? Kissing the corpse king? Kissing the sun? Lin asked. Lord Luya wiped the sweat off his forehead. Maybe he felt that you were too bored, so he created some missions to stimulate your cultivation life. Boom! The darkness behind Enlin exploded, giving Downlord Luya a fright. Enlin forced himself to calm down. However, the system has many things that even the paramount heavenly gods don't have, such as the extraordinary sword Tao, the body of the war god, the five-elemental body, the dark immortal transformation, and other extremely special divine bodies and mystic techniques. A mysterious smile appeared on Downlord Luya's face. Do you think those spell techniques are very powerful? Then do you know how powerful the heavenly darkness god was when she destroyed the Purple Star ruins? The Purple Star was once the most powerful force on the Tai Chu continent, but it was destroyed in an instant. All of the gods of creation that were on good terms with them didn't even dare to make sound. If they tried to participate, they would also be annihilated. Downlord Luya pointed toward the east. The heavenly darkness god was far more terrifying than the current heavenly light god. And Lin was astonished. Was he really that bad? *SS in the past. He was still perplexed. We're all paramount heavenly gods, so why is there such a huge disparity in power? Downlord Luya pointed toward the blue-tailed mermaid. Just look at Lan Xiaoni. You'll understand why there's such a huge disparity in power, even though we're all just ordinary heavenly gods. A thoughtful expression appeared on Enlin's face. Is it because of the heavenly Tao's suppression? That's right. At the time, the heavenly Tao was facing a calamity of extinction, so it removed all of its restrictions on the heavenly darkness god. The heavenly darkness god was able to unleash the most complete paramount heavenly god power without any restrictions. Spell techniques created using that kind of power are no ordinary spell techniques. Downlord Luya answered Enlin's question. He continued, after that, he created the god of war system and found me in order to pave the way for his own reincarnation. Of course, his ultimate goal was for the future of the heavenly Tao. The flaws in the heavenly Tao couldn't be fixed in a short time, so he chose to reincarnate. Then, what should I do after I reincarnate and awaken the complete power of darkness? Enlin asked. Downlord Luya looked at Enlin with a meaningful expression. You were the one who made the decision, so shouldn't you be the one to make the choice? Enlin was in despair. How am I supposed to know what I was thinking? Downlord Luya splayed his hands open. I'm just a delivery man, so I can't help you with this. Oh, by the way, I intentionally arranged for Xiao Hong and Yiling. After all, they're both extremely rare beings blessed by the heavenly Tao and have great potential to mend the heavens or become the heavenly Tao. It's a pity that the tribulation came too early, so there's nothing I can do. Downlord Luya paused momentarily before adding. Enlin's eyes widened. You're the grandpa that Yiling was talking about, but Xiao Hong, oh. When you teleported to Earth, I was the one who told the divine general to sneeze. Otherwise, how could you have made a mistake during the teleportation and ended up crushing the delicate little blossom? Downlord Luya chuckled, and Lin drew a sharp intake of breath. He really didn't think of this. Chapter 2380. And Lin's heart was in turmoil. So Xiao Hong and Yiling's immortal opportunities had all been planned by Downlord Luya. No wonder they were supremely talented prodigies with exceptional aptitudes who could easily cultivate. There really was something fishy about such a coincidence. However, Enlin didn't mind Downlord Luya's plan as he viewed Xiao Hong and Yiling as his family. As for mending the heavens, he naturally wasn't going to let Xiao Hong and Yiling bear such a heavy burden. Enlin simply couldn't bring himself to sacrifice his own family. I designed a system myself. What is the true purpose of that life-giving technique? How did I obtain the power to crush all the other paramount heavenly gods? Enlin murmured to himself. Downlord Luya stroked his chin. That power is actually the power of the heavenly darkness god, which is also the heavenly darkness god's most powerful form. He can ignore the subconscious will of the heavenly Tao and obtain absolute power. Of course, you know the price to pay. Once you use it up, your life will be erased. When that time comes, it will be time for you to return to the heavenly Tao. And Lin heaved a forlorn sigh. So that's how it is. That's all I can say. The heavenly darkness God only asked me to transfer the system to his reincarnation system and inform him of the truth at the right time. As for the rest, Downlord Luya turned to Enlin and said in a slow voice, "You'll have to do it yourself." Enlin's brows furrowed slightly. "I'll do it myself." At this moment, the darkness in the west surged for countless kilometers, as if it were about to engulf the entire world. The sea of light in the east was also extremely vast, and it had inundated the entire eastern heaven and earth. Light and darkness had become the only clash on the Tai Chu continent. It was like a legendary battle between good and evil. However, most living beings hoped that darkness would emerge victorious. The colorful light barrier began to disappear. Enlin and Downlord Luya's figures began to appear. Su Xiaolan and the others all turned to look at Enlin with concern in their eyes. "Enlin, are you all right?" Su Xiaolan asked. "It's okay. Luya just told me about the source of my power." Enlin smiled and said gently. His evil-slaying sword was still absorbing the power of Tao from the paramount heavenly god, but was already nearing the end. Meanwhile, his power of darkness had already completed its transformation. A burst of pure, eternal darkness had already engulfed the heavens, and it could end everything. Giant Enlin's darkness is already comparable to the light of absolute beginning of the light goddess. Tina's eyes lit up. She had clearly seen hope in this battle. Not only that, Su Xiaolan looked at the scene in front of her and said excitedly, "I feel that Enlin is stronger." Enlin smiled in relief. "Xiaolan really has faith in me." Men always wanted women to praise them for being awesome and strong, especially when this was a woman speaking from the bottom of her heart. Enlin's battle intent surged as he looked up at the sea of light in the east. The light goddess has the light of absolute beginning, and I have my eternal darkness. The final battle is about to begin. The last of the heavenly heaven god's power was absorbed. Enlin's cultivation base remained at the Tao integration pinnacle stage. He was unable to reach the God of creation stage, but he felt like even God of creation stage beings were as feeble as infants in his eyes. Aside from Downlord Luya, Tina, and Xiaolan, he felt like he could crush gods of creation like flowing gold, Blackstone, Canaline, and the realm enlightened being with a single strike. No, he didn't even need a single strike. One slap was enough, Sai. Am I already this bad? Enlin was a little dazed. All of a sudden, a ding-dong sounded in his mind, giving him a fright. Detected that host has absorbed the paramount heavenly god and successfully activated Yin and Yang. Yang God cultivation method has reached the 9th stage. Yin God cultivation method has reached the 9th stage. Only then did Enlin recall that the heavenly god also controlled Yin and Yang, and it had also helped him observe Yin and Yang. To put it more accurately, the darkness had engulfed the sky and extracted the knowledge of Yin and Yang from the sky, thereby becoming more powerful. This was the freakish power of the heavenly god of darkness. A vast amount of information began to flow into Enlin's mind. The Yin and Yang within Enlin's body had been perfected, and it was faintly connected to the 5 elements. Right at this moment, another ding-dong sounded, interrupting Enlin's train of thought. Detected that host's metal, wood, water, fire, earth, wind, lightning, Yin and Yang, and spirit cultivation have all been perfected. Now activating final body mode. Dark War God body. Boom. Terrifying energy erupted from Enlin's body. A 5-elemental golden halo appeared behind Enlin, and the 5 elemental essences within the 5 holes on the outer halo were still fusing with one another. The Yin and Yang fishes began to appear in the center of the halo, and they formed a new cycle with the power of the 5 elements. The power of wind and lightning was on the edge, and the golden halo sped up as well as all of the essences within the halo. The most powerful darkness within Enlin's body also began to fuse into the golden halo, transforming it into a dark halo. The 9 essences within the halo were quickly fusing together to form a new power. Enlin himself was unable to describe this power. The darkness could engulf everything, but it also contained the 9 essences. After the 9 essences fused with the darkness, they could undergo a qualitative change. He was no longer himself, and the darkness was no longer darkness. If he had to describe it, it would be a colorful darkness. This was a new power that Enlin referred to as the power of the Dark War God. An extremely terrifying war god aura began to emanate from his body. All of the living beings on the Tai Chu continent shuddered involuntarily in fear. This was especially true for the living beings who had once been enemies with Enlin. The Western Dragon, the Void Spirit Tribe, the Blood Tribe, and all of the powerful beings from the creation realm all fell to their knees and called out to their daddy when they sensed the Dark War God aura. After all, this divine might was simply unprecedented. The power of darkness and light was about the same level, but the great terror and the great finality of darkness was much, much stronger than that of light. In reality, most of the heavenly human tribe united army powerful beings who were secretly spectating the battle from the White Nectar Sea had already fainted from fear. Emperor Fu Tian, the Soul Light Martial Emperor, and the other powerful beings at the Tao Integration Pinnacle stage were also drenched in cold sweat. They frantically concealed their auras in fear that Enlin would notice them. The heavenly lord of Tao and virtue couldn't help but sigh with emotion as he sensed the terrifying aura emanating from Enlin's body. The battle between light and darkness is about to begin. This has never been seen before on the Tai Chu continent. It can be described as an epic battle. Niwa also sighed with emotion. In terms of combat prowess, Enlin is invincible in this world. No one can compare to him. Perhaps the hope of the entire Tai Chu continent rests on Enlin's shoulders. This is something that I never thought would happen. Soon, Enlin's body of the Dark War God completed its transformation. His aura was long and profound, and his eyes were clear and bright. His appearance hadn't changed much aside from the fact that a black halo had appeared behind him. Enlin looked toward the sea of light in the east. There was no longer any fear or unease on his face. The only thing that remained was the will of a war god that would never admit defeat. Chapter 2381. Enlin was already determined to win. Light was indeed very powerful, and the light of absolute beginning had become his worst nightmare. It had even destroyed his chaotic alloy brick and vermilion bird mirror. But so what? He was no longer afraid. Wait, vermilion bird mirror? Enlin silently pulled out the punctured vermilion bird mirror from his storage ring and fell into deep thought. Little vermilion bird, are you all right? No, it's already dead. A forlorn voice sounded. Enlin heaved a sigh of relief before speaking with a guilty expression. The situation was dire, and I had no choice. Thank you for your hard work. The vermilion bird mirror remained silent. Enlin gently stroked the punctured surface of the vermilion bird mirror, and countless fragments of the mirror quickly converged before falling onto the damaged surface of the vermilion bird mirror. Darkness surged onto the surface of the mirror and enshrouded it. Within the span of a single breath, the darkness receded, and a flawless surface of the mirror appeared before everyone's eyes, with not a single crack to be seen. How? How'd he fix it? Lu Jin's eyes widened. This is beyond the scope of my knowledge. Blackstone was also dumbstruck. Was this darkness omnipotent? It could even be used as glue, and it was the glue of an item that was beyond the realm of divine artifacts. Even if you can help me get back together, it'll be very difficult for us to reunite. Little vermilion bird's tender and resentful voice sounded. Enlin smiled and didn't say anything. He placed the vermilion bird mirror back into his storage ring. After doing all this, he turned toward the boundless light in the east. Let's go and meet that so-called heavenly light goddess. Everyone's expressions became solemn. The battle with the heavenly light goddess could no longer be fought by anyone below the god of creation stage. Even a god of creation could fall at any moment. The sea of light in the distance suddenly contracted. Rumble, an anguished wail swept through heaven and earth. The entire sky suddenly turned dark red, and a rain of blood began to fall. The true demon territory was dark red, and hung low, whimpering as if it was crying. What happened? Flowing Gold's eyes widened. Not only has the phenomenon affected the entire Tai Chu continent, but it's even spreading beyond the barrier and into the boundless realm of stars. Could this be a new heavenly Tao phenomenon? Patriarch Zhu Yin was also very perplexed. However, in the next second, news of the death of the god began to spread throughout the entire Tai Chu continent and even the entire universe. The great Tao of heaven and earth was mourning. It was a tremor that was even more sorrowful than the death of a Tao integration cultivator. Endless sorrow also surged in the hearts of billions of living beings at that moment. The overgod of the true demons, Cyril, he had fallen. All the members of the true demon tribe were sobbing. Demon Emperor Cuyu's expression was completely blank, and his face was filled with disbelief. He said in a trembling voice, "No, Lord Cyril, this is impossible." Demon Lord Ling Gu fell to his knees, and he couldn't help but burst into tears. It had always revered Cyril and worshipped him, but didn't think that even such a powerful man would perish. This was extremely difficult for it to accept. In reality, none of the living beings on the Tai Chu continent could accept this. Even the enemies of the heaven-crushing sect, such as the Blood Tribe and the Void Spirit Tribe, didn't dare to believe this. They had guessed that Cyril would be defeated, but they definitely didn't think that he would die. The pinnacle of the God of Creation stage, the most powerful being of the true demon tribe, the number one heavenly disciple of the heaven-crushing sect, the number one leader of the heaven-crushing sect, had died, just like that. Lin was rooted to the spot. He hadn't interacted much with Cyril, but they were still friends. Furthermore, they were comrades who stood firmly on the same side. Lin had never sparred with Cyril, but he knew that Cyril was definitely an invincible being who could look down on the entire Tai Chu continent. He had founded the heaven-crushing sect, destroyed the heavenly Tao, and finally become the heavens. Regardless of whether it was in terms of ambition or power, none of the powerful beings he had encountered could compare to him. However, such a great being had actually fallen just like that. It was so sudden. It was so abrupt that no one had any time to react. He had clearly completed his mission here and was just about to head over to save the day. No, if Cyril has fallen, then doesn't that mean Chun Chun? And Lin's heart jolted upon hearing this. Let's get over there. Boom! And Lin transformed into a streak of black light that pierced through the heavens before hurtling toward the Purple Star ruins at an extremely terrifying speed. He was so fast that even spatial skipping was no match for him. All of the gods of creation also came to their senses, and they immediately repressed their grief before hurrying toward the Purple Star ruins behind Lin. Niwa hurriedly followed along with Little Hong Ling. Little Hong Ling was unable to resist the overwhelming grief of heaven and earth, and tears welled up in his eyes as he gripped tightly on Niwa's sleeve, clearly extremely fearful. Niwa's heart was also extremely heavy. Never would she have thought that Cyril would fall, and at the hands of the light goddess at that. Just how powerful was the light goddess? Things were spiraling out of control. Not only was the heaven-crushing sect in grave peril, but even the heaven-mending sect might have to be ruled by the light goddess, the heavenly lord of Tao and virtue, and Tao Lord Luya also hurriedly followed along. Even though they couldn't participate in the battle, they were still very concerned about this battle that would decide the fate of the Tai Chu continent. Sigh, who would have thought that the being who had the highest chance of reaching the God of Creation stage on the Tai Chu continent would fall just like that? How lamentable! The heavenly lord of Tao and virtue shook his head. Even though he failed, Cyril is still someone worthy of my respect. Tao Lord Luya shook his head before turning to the heavenly lord of Tao and virtue. He said that he wanted to become the heavens for himself, but a part of it was definitely for the lives of the Tai Chu continent as well. He died for the sake of the Tai Chu continent. Just this alone is something that neither you nor I can compare to. The heavenly lord of Tao and virtue nodded in agreement with Tao Lord Luya's words. They had eternal lives and could wander around the world without any restrictions. But at the end of the day, they had too many misgivings and didn't dare to act. Cyril was different. He wanted to create a different ending. Even though he had failed and fallen, he had done something that even the gods of creation didn't dare to do. There would be people who would pass on this legacy. At the Purple Star Ruins, at the place where the rain of blood was the heaviest, sorrow enshrouded the entire area. All of the heaven-crushing sect members had tears in their eyes, and some of them even had mental breakdowns. Tears flowed from their eyes as they stared blankly at the scenes unfolding before their eyes. The headless demonic body that was several million feet in length stood before the sword. The luminous demon Tao sword had already been sliced in half, and there were countless ghastly holes and countless bloody gashes on its body. The bones in its arms and legs had all been shattered. Even so, it still didn't fall. Instead, it continued to stand tall and proud, bathed in the rain of blood. This headless demonic body was none other than Cyril, whose life force had been completely extinguished. The rain of blood continued to fall relentlessly. The light goddess over 1,000,000 feet in length revealed her flawless true body. She held a gargantuan true demon's head in her hand as she turned toward the youth in linen garments with a faint smile. Now, it's your turn. Chapter 2382. It was impossible to describe just how sorrowful the heaven-crushing sect members were right now. Cyril was the number one heavenly disciple of the heaven-crushing sect. He was one of the two main pillars of the heaven-crushing sect. However, such an invincible man had perished right before their very eyes. However, even though the heaven-crushing sect members were grief-stricken, they still poured their power into the heaven-crushing formation in a frenzy. They couldn't forget the words of that indomitable man at the last moment of his life. Continue to fight. Yes, continue to fight. Cyril had died in battle. Even if the broken heavenly Tao sword had already broken his strongest sword, even if the broken heavenly Tao sword had already beheaded him, even if the primordial light exploded in his body, even if the goddess of light revealed her true form and destroyed his origin, he did not fall. Until the very last moment of his life, he was still standing. He used his huge body to stand in front of Chen. It was like a mountain, desperately guarding. The most powerful man in the heaven-crushing sect had sacrificed his life to fulfill the will of the heaven-crushing sect. That's right. Cyril had already used his life to tell them what they had to do. So how could they back down and give up? Hold on. Don't disappoint heavenly disciple Cyril. The ancient dragon empress roared with tears in her eyes. Heaven-crushing technique. All of the heaven-crushing sect members frantically infused their power into the formation beneath their feet. Heaven-shattering, heaven-shattering, heaven-breaker. Black patterns covered heaven and earth. The sky-splitting formation had reached its final stage. However, from the goddess of light's point of view, this sky-breaking array was so fragile that as long as she crushed the sky-breaking glazed palace into nothingness, the sky-breaking array would collapse on its own. Of course, before destroying the heaven-shattering glazed palace, she had to first eliminate the second enemy that posed a threat to her. The goddess of light held the heavenly Tao sword in one hand and Cyril's head in the other. She looked at the young man who was suffering from the backlash of the heavenly Tao tribulation, and a faint smile appeared on her face. Now, it's your turn. Chun Shen's body was already on the verge of collapse from the backlash of the heavenly Tao. Blood flowed from all 7 of his orifices, and fresh blood covered his delicate face. He lowered his head with a sorrowful expression on his face. He wasn't sad about his fate, but Cyril's death did indeed make him grieve. Chun was a very good judge of character, and he knew that Cyril was a great man who truly cared about the continent. He was also a good friend. However, Cyril had died in battle right before his eyes. Even in death, he still wanted to protect himself. Even though Chun had calmed down his emotions, he was still extremely moved at this moment. He looked at the back of the figure that stood in front of him like a divine mountain. The 100 divine swords that were stabbed into the figure's body were all broken, losing their original sword might and luster. Blood rained down continuously, dripping onto the figure that was riddled with thousands of holes. It was a tragic scene. Cyril, our plan. Chun took a deep breath. We haven't failed yet. As soon as he finished speaking, he seemed to have suppressed the backlash from the supreme heavenly Tao in the sky. An extremely powerful force surged out of his body and gathered on the black and white Sky Destroyer spear, and he fiercely stabbed it towards the sky again. Rumble. The heavenly Tao was completely shattered by the black and white spear. "You're looking to die," the radiant goddess roared, pointing a finger at Qin Shun. The light of the primordial light was like a platinum flying sword. It pierced through the bloody rain and headed straight for Chun Shen's head. In Chun Shen's current state, he was completely unable to take this attack. "Xiaohong." A cold and clear voice erupted throughout heaven and earth. "Purple Star Heaven-Piercing Armor, activate." It was as if a new sun had appeared between heaven and earth. An extremely dazzling girl suddenly appeared before Qin Shun. She had a slender and exquisite figure, and her exquisitely beautiful face was the perfect combination of seduction and purity. Her red dress was enshrouded in a peculiar armor that glowed with a faint purple light. "Purple Star, beautiful maiden warrior, little red ginseng, go." The young woman let loose a clear cry, and a shield of divine Tao light that was rapidly rotating like a vortex erupted from her hands. At the same time, extremely rich purple divine light erupted from her armor, enshrouding the shield of light and making it even more resolute and resolute. Boom! The light of absolute beginning crashed into the shield of light, and a ring of energy exploded. The light of absolute beginning entered the purple divine light domain, and its brightness dimmed at a rate that was discernible to the naked eye. It then crashed into the vortex of light, causing the shield of light to crack open. Warning: the enemy's energy has exceeded the limits of the equipment. Suddenly, there was another explosion. The Purple Star Heaven-Piercing Armor around Xiao Hong's body cracked open, and she was knocked back by the terrifying force of the explosion as she threw up a mouthful of blood. The light of absolute beginning disappeared, but the girl in red was still standing in the air. She wiped the blood from the corners of her lips and spread open her arms to shield Chun behind her. "Don't you dare attack Master's friends." Qin Shun faltered upon hearing this. He looked at the girl before him with a surprised expression. "You're Xiao Hong from the 4-9 Immortal Sect?" All of the heaven-crushing sect members were astonished. This girl is clearly only at the Tao integration stage, but she was able to block the light of absolute beginning from the light of absolute beginning. My God, what kind of freak is this? Xiao Hong from the 4-9 Immortal Sect? That's the only girl who has reached the Tao integration stage. The 4-9 Immortal Sect really is full of freaks. Not only were they in disbelief, but even the light goddess was also stunned. However, after taking a glance at Xiao Hong, she turned toward another direction. There was still a white-robed woman above the clouds, and she gave the light goddess a vague sense of danger. You're just using a foreign object's affinity with the divine Tao of light. You can block me once, but can you block me a second time? The radiant goddess looked at the heavily wounded, red-robed young woman and unleashed another attack. Xiao Hong was not fearful in the slightest upon hearing this. Instead, a faint smile appeared on her face. "I don't have to block you a second time. I still have Master." The light of absolute beginning pierced through everything and shot directly toward Xiao Hong's body. Rumble, darkness suddenly fell from the heavens and landed right on the light of absolute beginning, completely engulfing the boundlessly powerful light of absolute beginning. Not even a sliver of light shone through. The light goddess expression shifted, and she turned to look behind her. She was greeted by the sight of a man who was stepping through the boundless darkness. A black halo rapidly revolved behind him, and a terrifying divine might suddenly erupted from his body as he launched a merciless punch toward the light goddess. Boom! Boundless darkness blotted out heaven and earth. In that instant, the entire heaven and earth darkened apart from the light goddess herself. All of the darkness instantly transformed into a boundless fist of darkness that was several million feet in size. The fist violently tore through the light of absolute beginning before crashing into the light goddess chest. Another earth-shattering boom erupted. The light goddess' holy and powerful body caved in from the force of the fist. The gargantuan body that was over 10 million feet tall was sent flying, and it rolled a few times on the ground before crashing into Cyril's body right before the dumbstruck expressions of all of the living beings in the surrounding area. Chapter 2383. The heaven-crushing sect members were all dumbstruck. Never would they have thought that the powerful heavenly light goddess would be sent flying by a single punch. The ancient dragon empress yelled in excitement. "It's Enlin, heavenly disciple, and Lin is back." The heaven-crushing sect members also came to their senses. They looked up at the domineering male in the sky, and tears of excitement welled up in their eyes. It was as if they had seen the light of dawn appear before their eyes in the darkest hour of their lives. It really is heavenly disciple Enlin. This is great. He's back. That's the heavenly light goddess. Who would have thought that Enlin would be so powerful? Heavenly disciple Enlin, I beg of you, you must avenge heavenly disciple Cyril. The heaven-crushing sect members were overjoyed by Enlin's power. Cyril's sacrifice and Enlin's domineering entrance both motivated them in a special way. A hint of relief appeared on Chun Chen's face. "Enlin, I knew that you were a trustworthy person. No, I'm still too late." Enlin said softly as he looked at the headless demonic body. The heavenly light goddess crashed into Cyril's body, and the head in her hand also slipped out of her grasp, rolling to the feet of the demonic body. Cyril's eyes, which were brimming with battle intent, seemed to be silently mocking the heavenly light goddess. Chun Chen's mood also became gloomy at the mention of Cyril, and the black and white heaven-crushing spear in his hand mercilessly pierced into the heavenly Tao again. The heavenly Tao had already collapsed. As long as the heavenly Tao was completely destroyed, the final step would be completed. Damn it, what three paramount beings! Even the heavenly darkness goddess couldn't stop them, and they even allowed darkness to undergo a transformation. The heavenly light goddess stood up again. As expected, lies and whatnot are all unreliable. The light of the beginning of chaos and the beginning of absolute beginning began to radiate from the massive body. It was as if a sun had risen from the east, and it possessed the power to nurture and penetrate through all things. Enlin, you've obtained true darkness, but do you think that you can fight against me just like that? The goddess of light's body erupted with rays of light, like a huge golden glass body, standing tall on the earth, gathering holy beauty and infinite hope, bringing endless light to the earth and sky of the entire continent. Every ray of light she released was full of hope and possibility, as if it was the most primitive state of all things, the most basic wave and particle of all things. This was the primordial light. It possessed the highest level of energy, possessing the most terrifying destructive power. It could purify and erase everything it came into contact with. Glorious primordium. Such a beautiful divine body didn't seem to have any offensive ability, but the invisible power accumulated was enough to suppress billions of living beings. Enlin faced the powerful goddess of light in front of him. He pulled out the hairpin on his head and let his black hair dance in the wind, looking quite casual and unruly. His handsome face still had a calm expression. His eyes stared at the light in front of him, which was getting brighter and brighter. His eyes were still as black gemstones. He said indifferently, "Whether I can resist it or not, we'll only know after we fight." The dark ring quickly spun. Dense darkness began to spread out with Enlin at the center like a wave. However, this wave was a little exaggerated, as it could actually engulf the entire world. Absolute darkness, a darkness that could devour and end everything, a darkness that couldn't pass through light, began to compete with the primordial light for territory and territory. The primordial light, which could penetrate and purify everything, stabbed into the darkness, but it couldn't penetrate it at all. This was because the darkness had completely surpassed the scope of things. It was an absolute supreme concept, representing eternal nothingness and end. When everything was gone, everything would naturally become dark. This concept was the exact opposite of the primordial light. The primordial light gave birth to everything, while the darkness ended everything. The supreme power of darkness and the supreme power of light finally clashed at this moment. Rumble, the great Tao of heaven and earth trembled and cracked from the impact of this absolute power. The battle between darkness and light had already surpassed the scope of existence of everything in this world. Billions of living beings could only see half of the light and half of the darkness colliding. Sometimes the light prevailed, and sometimes the darkness crossed half the sky. The battle between the two of them obscured everything between heaven and earth. No one knew how the battle was progressing. They couldn't even see the bodies of Enlin and the light goddess clearly. All they could see were light and darkness. The battle between light and darkness was like a beacon that indicated the direction of the Tai Chu continent's fate. Either light covered heaven and earth, or darkness ruled over the world. This scene was extremely similar to the battle between the light goddess and Cyril. The heaven-crushing forces were really afraid that when the light faded, Enlin's cold corpse would appear between heaven and earth. However, Enlin didn't disappoint them. They could see the eternal nature of the darkness, which made it invincible. No matter how much the primordial light suppressed it, it wouldn't be destroyed. Instead, it would be reflected and even slowly devoured toward the light. Right at this moment, the light goddess voice reverberated through this world again. Tao is one. Light and darkness are two. Your darkness and my primordial light are on the same level. Light and darkness complement each other, and neither could defeat the other. However, all of this is based on balance. And I have a weapon that can break this balance. Just as her voice fell, a sword appeared from the light and pierced through the universe. The broken sword of the heavenly Tao had appeared. This sword was imbued with an ancient heavenly Tao, and it possessed unparalleled universe-level offensive power, as well as the most terrifying sharpness. This greatly enhanced the offensive power of the primordial light. It appeared, the light goddess sword. All of the heaven-crushing sect members let loose cries of surprise. Even though the entire world had been occupied by light and darkness, they could still clearly see an extremely special sword amidst the boundless light. It was currently displaying its invincible sharpness, a sharpness that made countless living beings tremble in fear. All of the heaven-crushing sect members knew that Heavenly Prince Cyril had been defeated by this sword. They weren't sure if Heavenly Prince Enlin would be able to withstand it. The transcendent and ethereal sword light began to pierce into the darkness, tearing the eternal darkness into two halves from the middle. It was as if the whole darkness had been cut into two pieces. It was as if the light would eventually break and the night would eventually come to an end. All of the living beings who were looking up at this scene couldn't help but let loose cries of surprise. All of the heaven-crushing sect members felt as if their hearts had been torn apart along with the darkness. All of them couldn't help but yell out Enlin's name. The situation had taken a turn for the better. The darkness that had previously held the upper hand was sliced in half after the broken sword of the heavenly Tao appeared. Furthermore, the crack in the light was starting to spread from the center, as if it was going to completely shatter the darkness and transform the world into a sea of light. Chapter 2384. Only at this moment did Enlin truly understand just what level of power Cyril was facing. Just what level of martial prowess was this? The boundless light brought with it boundless pressure. Not only was the heavenly light invincible, but there was also an infinite amount of absolute beginning light. There was no way to completely defend against this attack. This was enough to strike despair into the hearts of all gods of creation. Furthermore, the appearance of the damaged heavenly Tao sword further enhanced the heavenly light goddess' offensive prowess to an unstoppable level. It was more than enough to destroy any opponent's defenses. Even Enlin's eternal darkness was no exception. Enlin could sense that there was a sword with no end in sight. A sword that was sharp enough to slice through all things was crashing down upon his body with a peerless sword might. At this moment, he felt as if he was no longer facing a sword. Instead, He felt as if he was facing a universe filled with destruction and despair that was trying to take him down with it. The divine light goddess attack was far more terrifying than Enlin could have ever imagined. If Enlin hadn't undergone this transformation, he would already be dead at this moment. However, there was still no fear on Enlin's face. Instead, an extremely sharp light flashed through his eyes. The darkness was repelled by the damaged heavenly Dao sword, forcing Enlin's body out again. All of the living beings present were extremely nervous at this moment, and it was as if their hearts had stopped beating for an instant. Just as they were wondering what kind of darkness Enlin was going to unleash in response to this devastating attack, Enlin tore off the black halo behind him right before everyone's eyes. Then, he threw the ring like a wheel at the sword that was slashing at him. "You have your damaged heavenly Dao sword, but I have my darkness 9 essence ring." Boom! The colorful darkness completely exploded at this moment. The collision between the two instantly shattered the space within a radius of tens of thousands of kilometers. The darkness crashed into the unstoppable damaged heavenly Dao sword and stopped it in its tracks. An unimaginable amount of energy erupted from the point of contact. The divine light goddess expression shifted. It shouldn't be like this. Her most powerful attack shouldn't have been blocked. The incomplete sword of the heavenly Dao, combined with the boundless sea of light, was an invincible technique that could slay even Cyril, who was at the pinnacle of combat prowess on the Tai Chu continent. Not only was the Darkness 9 Origins ring not destroyed, but it also rapidly spun and sliced at the massive sword, trying to slice the damaged heavenly Dao sword in half. The light was the sword, and the darkness was the wheel. Their clash once again created an extremely spectacular scene that was engraved into the Tai Chu continent. Enlin and the Goddess of Light were once again in a stalemate. This was not what the Goddess of Light wanted to see. It was also at this moment that something she didn't want to see happened. An azure dragon tore through the primordial light, and a 5-colored vermilion bird flapped its wings, crashing into the Goddess of Light's chest with immense power. Creation divine art. Dragon Sparrow splits the heavens. Su Xiaolan released all the power in her body and unleashed her strongest attack on the Goddess of Light. The Goddess of Light focused all her power on dealing with Enlin, so she naturally ignored Su Xiaolan, who could barely contend with the primordial light. Bam! The vermilion bird charged forward first, followed by the azure dragon. The dragon sparrow crashed heavily into the Goddess of Light's massive body, upon which the dragon sparrow essential power exploded forth. The Goddess of Light's chest throbbed with pain, and she stumbled back involuntarily. It was also at this moment that Tina appeared before her, and countless types of essential power burst forth from the divine mirror world sword in her hand. "This is the final battle. Lend me all of your power." Tina's long golden hair danced in the wind, and her emerald eyes reflected everything in the divine mirror world. She looked up at the mighty Goddess of Light, who was powerful enough to look down on the entire world. In that instant, not only did the essential power of the divine mirror world explode forth, but even the essential power of the gods of creation in the divine mirror world, including the Black Stone and Tian Yi, erupted forth from the divine mirror world sword. Not only did this sword strike represent Tina's absolute combat prowess, but it was also a strike that was infused with the most powerful combat prowess in the entire divine mirror world. The mirror projection was as vast as the sky, and the essential power was as vast as the ocean. It was as if countless gods of creation were wielding swords at the same time before slashing down upon the Goddess of Light. Rip! A gash was torn into the Goddess of Light's body. She stumbled back again. This wasn't a serious injury, but the balance between her and Enlin had been disrupted at this moment. Su Xiaolan and Tina were clearly super powerful beings who had the right to participate in this battle, so this was an extremely serious matter. The damaged heavenly Dao sword was knocked aside by the Darkness 9 Essences ring due to the Goddess of Light's distraction. The Darkness 9 Essences ring's attacks didn't stop there, and it slashed through the sea of absolute beginning light before slicing through the Goddess of Light's waist. Whoosh! A tearing sound erupted. The goddess of light's waist was sliced open by the darkness, and the extreme light within her body tried to purify and pierce through the darkness. However, the darkness was eternal and indestructible, and it forcibly kept the light at bay. Not only that, but it also sliced through the darkness to slice all of the light within her body in half. From the outside, it looked as if the goddess of light had been sliced in half by the darkness nine essences ring in the blink of an eye. It was like beating a drowning dog. Rumble. The darkness surged violently, quickly engulfing the absolute beginning light, which was at a disadvantage. Most of heaven and earth were shrouded in darkness. Our battle prowess and weapons are about the same, but I'm still more powerful than you, because I still have little Lon and Tina. And Lin smiled smugly as he controlled the darkness nine essences ring to slice the goddess of light into pieces. The goddess of light reacted extremely quickly, and she pulled back the damaged Heavenly Tao sword at an incredible speed. She positioned herself in front of the Darkness Nine Essences ring and defended herself against the deadly attacks of the Darkness Nine Essences ring. Su Xiaolan and Tina pressed forward once again, harassing and launching surprise attacks from both sides. The Goddess of Light was unexpectedly calm, and she didn't rush to retaliate. Instead, she focused on defense, and she managed to stabilize her position. Her body that had been sliced in half was also pieced back together under the guidance of the absolute beginning light. The remaining divine mirror particles and eternal darkness within her body were also completely wiped out. And Lin, Su Xiaolan, and Tina had joined forces to attack. Although they had the upper hand, their subsequent attacks were unable to leave any new wounds on the Goddess of Light's body. That's right, and Lin and the others couldn't win. However, the Goddess of Light didn't have the slightest hint of joy on her face. The sky was still shattering. The Heavenly Tao was still heading towards annihilation. And Lin and the others weren't in a hurry. This was because they knew that if they could delay the Goddess of Light now, they would be the ones to win in the end. It shouldn't be like this. I've already reached the pinnacle of my strength. This isn't the result I wanted. A hint of indignation and hatred appeared on the Goddess of Light's face. The wrath of the heavens, the pain of the heavens, and the sorrow of the heavens shouldn't end like this in order to make all living beings regret and remember. A resolute expression gradually appeared on the Goddess of Light's flawless face. She looked at the Darkness Nine Essences ring that was flying towards her once again, and the damaged Heavenly Tao sword suddenly changed direction. The Nine Essences ring descended. A massive black gash appeared on the Goddess of Light's chest. All the living beings watching this battle widened their eyes at this moment. They were witnessing an extremely bizarre and unbelievable scene. It wasn't because Enlin had severely injured the Goddess of Light again. Instead, it was because that extremely sharp blade, that damaged Heavenly Tao sword that could annihilate all things, had suddenly pierced into the Goddess of Light's heart. The one wielding the sword. It was the Goddess of Light herself. Chapter 2385. All the spectators were dumbstruck by this sudden turn of events. What's going on? Why is the Heavenly Light Goddess stabbing herself with a sword? Oh my God! Does she want to die because she can't get over it? Even if she knows she can't defeat her, there's no need for her to commit suicide on the spot, right? The Goddess of Light definitely wouldn't give up just like that. There must be something fishy going on here. All the spectators watched as the Heavenly Light Goddess body trembled violently after being pierced by the Heavenly Sword. She spat out a mouthful of golden blood, clearly having been severely wounded. It was quite clear that the Heavenly Light Goddess was serious about stabbing herself. Even Enlin was slightly taken aback by her actions. However, he wasn't going to give the Heavenly Light Goddess a chance to do anything else. The Dark Nine Essence ring continued to slash toward the Heavenly Light Goddess head. She was severely wounded, so he had to finish her off. If she wanted to die, then he had to make sure she died. The Heavenly Light Goddess looked up at the lethal attack, and the divine ring above her head suddenly erupted with an unprecedented light. Her body also rapidly shrank, shrinking from 1,000,000 feet to 10,000 times its original size in the blink of an eye. At this moment, the dark 9 essence ring had already torn through the void and landed in front of her. Extreme killing intent, extreme sharpness, and extreme darkness. If this were before, the heavenly light goddess would have been completely defenseless, and she would have been sliced in half in the next second. However, at this moment, the heavenly light goddess's hand moved at an incredible speed. She clenched her fingers, and in the blink of an eye, she gripped tightly onto the rapidly rotating dark ring. Crack, crack, crack. The ring's sharpness sliced into the heavenly light goddess hand, unleashing an explosion of darkness. However, it was instantly suppressed by an extremely pure light. The light goddess body continued to shrink until she reverted back to her original form as the moonlit night monarch. However, her black dress had become golden in color, and her long black hair had become platinum in color. The aura emanating from her body began to soar explosively to the point where even Enlin was unable to detect it. Enlin's most powerful attack, the dark 9 essence ring, was forcibly stopped by the heavenly light goddess hand. The goddess of light's right hand pulled out the broken sword of the heavenly way that was pierced into her chest. The wound healed in the blink of an eye and became flawless again. Her aura changed from extremely terrifying to extremely restrained, and a faint halo of light was released from her body. It was like the sun in spring, making billions of people feel infinite beauty and hope. What a wonderful person. This was the feeling that all living beings had when they first laid eyes on the heavenly light goddess. However, to Enlin and the others, the woman standing in front of them gave them an endless sense of danger. They could not help but tremble instinctively. They knew what they were facing now. This was the heavenly light god's Tao true image. A boundless phenomenon appeared behind the woman. Myriad worlds, mountains, rivers, all kinds of living beings, wind, fire, lightning, time and space. Everything that Enlin could and couldn't imagine appeared behind the woman. As if that was everything. That was the true meaning of the existence of this world. Bang! Enlin's dark 9 essence ring was suddenly shattered by the heavenly light goddess. Enlin's essence artifact had been destroyed, and he suffered a backlash. He felt as if his internal organs had been torn apart, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. You injured yourself just to use your true Tao form. Enlin asked in a cold voice as he stabilized his injuries. That's right. Even though I have a chance of winning in a head-on battle, I don't have much time left. I have to finish this battle in one go. The heavenly light goddess smiled and released the broken dark ring. She pointed her palm toward the shattered sky, and she said in a calm voice, "Stop, shattered heavenly Tao." All things came to life with a single word. The heaven's mandate instantly filled the entire sky with a pure light. The heavenly Tao, which was moving toward destruction, seemed to have been frozen under the light. It was as if the pause button had been pressed and all of the Tao fragments stopped being destroyed. What kind of power is this? An expression of astonishment appeared on Chun Chen's face. He knew very well that this method of stopping the heavenly Tao, which was on the brink of destruction, was countless times more powerful than allowing the heavenly Tao to continue being destroyed. Is this the peak state of the paramount heavenly god of light, when the heavenly Tao is at its weakest? Enlin was also a little dazed as he witnessed this miraculous scene. Was the heavenly light goddess trying to turn the tables on this battle on her own? It had to be said that she really did have this kind of power now. The heavenly light goddess had already locked her gaze onto Chun Chen again. Enlin suddenly sprang into action, and the evil-slaying sword in his hand erupted with the extremely powerful power of the divine Tao. Vanquish the heavens and slay all evil, annihilation. An invisible ripple twisted the light of origin before landing directly on the heavenly light goddess head. Bam! The power of annihilation exploded, and the light of origin within a radius of 100 feet was instantly blasted into smithereens. However, to Enlin's disbelief, the heavenly light goddess' flawless features were completely unscathed. The heavenly light goddess turned to look at Enlin with an expressionless face. She extended her hand and made a grabbing motion toward Enlin. Heavenly God technique, boundless light prison. The light of origin intertwined around Enlin, and an extremely sturdy cage of light suddenly appeared, enshrouding him within. Bam! The evil-slaying sword struck the cage of light, but was unable to leave a single mark on it. This cage of light didn't possess any offensive power, and its sole purpose was to trap enemies. However, it was precisely because all of its power was used to trap enemies that it was far more sturdy than Enlin had imagined. Enlin was completely unable to slice open the cage before him with his evil-slaying sword. Even his sword of the heavenly Tao, which had been infused with the power of darkness, was of no use. "Just stay in there quietly," the heavenly light goddess said with a faint smile. "Let me go. Let's have a battle to the death." Enlin roared with rage. As he spoke, his darkness 9 essence rings began to furiously slice open the cage of light again. However, his most powerful attacks were unable to leave even a single mark on the cage of light. Although this light was still the light of origin, the power behind it represented the first wisp of light that had created the absolute beginning universe. It was the most essential light that could give birth to limitless possibilities. This light represented the entire world, the truth of the entire world, and the true meaning of the existence of all living beings in heaven and earth. Not only was this a universal power, but it was also the most top-notch universal power. This power would be more than enough to kill Enlin. However, the heavenly light goddess didn't. She knew that even though Enlin was on the brink of death, he still had the ability to sacrifice his life force to turn the situation around. As such, she might as well just use her true Tao manifestation to trap Enlin. This method was similar to the goddess of life's choice. However, the goddess of life had no choice but to do this, while the heavenly light goddess had taken the initiative. "Enlin, there's nothing you can do. Just stay in there and watch me perform." The heavenly light goddess looked at Enlin, who was trapped in the cage of light, and a determined expression appeared in her eyes as she extended her arms toward the sky. The light of the beginning of chaos and the light of origin instantly filled the entire heavens. The entire Tai Chu continent was transformed into a world of boundless light. Chapter 2386. Enlin racked his brains, but was unable to break the light prison. He could only watch the goddess of light cast her spell through the translucent light prison. Heavenly God technique, myriad world light in one thought. The eyes of the goddess of light seemed to contain the scenery of the myriad worlds, and her fluttering platinum hair was ethereal like silk of light, connecting all the heavens that could be connected. The sky above the Tai Chu continent became a vast expanse of white. Billions of living beings felt extremely comfortable. However, at the same time, they also felt as if light had locked onto them. Being watched really doesn't feel good. Tao Lord Luya shook his head. All light is used by the heavenly light god. It's limitless and boundless, without beginning and without end. This quantity is truly beyond imagination. Is this really a power that a consciousness can control? What kind of monster did Panga create? The heavenly lord of Tao and virtue was also extremely astonished. The battle before him had already exceeded his imagination. Even if he wanted to intervene, he wouldn't be able to. The goddess of light's power had already reached a level that even the heavenly lord of Tao and virtue could only look on in awe. Chen Chen's expression changed once again. He discovered that the black and white sky-splitting spear in his hand had also been enveloped by the primordial light, and its sharpness was gradually being corroded away. Dustless, lightless. His eyes narrowed, and the dustless power that could annihilate the laws of the world also attached itself to the sky-shattering spear, rapidly disintegrating the primordial light on it. The goddess of light frowned slightly and slapped Chen. It was unknown how the attack pierced through space, but by the time the palm-sized beam of light appeared, it had already torn through the spotless domain and smashed into Chen Chen's chest. A loud explosion was heard. A bloody hole the size of a palm appeared on Chun Chen's chest, and his body was heavily smashed to the ground by the terrifying force. With a single strike, the heaven-crushing sect's second heavenly disciple was severely wounded and fell to the ground. If he doesn't learn from his mistakes, then he has to be eliminated, the goddess of light said indifferently. Rumble, a violent roar, came from the sky. Without Chun Chen's control, the black and white heaven-piercing spear that had pierced into the heavenly Tao began to tremble violently. Quick! Maintain the operation of the heaven-splitting formation. It wasn't easy for us to get this far. Don't give up. The ancient dragon empress yelled at the top of her lungs to encourage all of the heaven-crushing sect members. At the same time, she poured all of her heaven-crushing true intent and all of her power into the formation with all of her might. Heaven Breaker, Heaven Breaker, Heaven Breaker. All of the heaven-crushing sect members roared in unison. They gritted their teeth and unleashed all of the power in their bodies so that the black and white heaven-crushing spear wouldn't shatter. Even though they could no longer see hope, they still held on to their positions and prepared for the final battle. At the same time, a powerful force began to descend upon the heaven-crushing glazed palace. The immortal divine monkey, the eight-winged holy angel, the dark night elf queen, the demon god filled with demonic energy. It's the heavenly sun candidates. They've also come to maintain the heaven-crushing formation. A heaven-crushing sect member exclaimed with reddened eyes. Don't worry, I'm willing to fight to the death with the heaven-crushing sect. The battling Buddha chortled as he unleashed his immortal divine monkey true intent. With Master Cyril leading the way, we'll follow in his footsteps. What we have to fear? Demon Emperor Siyu yelled. All of the powerful heaven-crushing sect members chose to stand against the light even though they knew that they couldn't defeat their enemies. The powerful energy they gathered merged into the heaven-crushing formation and actually managed to stabilize the black and white heaven-crushing spear. The heaven-crushing spear, which was on the brink of collapse, began to show signs of recovery. Laughable resistance. The light goddess shook her head. She waved a hand, and the light of Genesis pierced through space again before crashing into the black and white heaven-crushing spear. The golden light pierced into the spear, and the spear instantly became riddled with cracks, as if it had been struck by some extremely terrifying power. Hold on. All of the heaven-crushing sect members frantically unleashed the power within their bodies in an attempt to maintain the heaven-crushing spear. However, an ear-piercing explosion pulled them back to reality. The spear that the heaven-crushing sect had high hopes for was instantly shattered into countless fragments, which transformed into a black and white energy ring that proliferated outward. An extremely terrifying backlash then struck the heaven-crushing sect members who were connected to the heaven-crushing formation, making them feel as if their bodies had been crushed by a sledgehammer. All of them fell to the ground with blood gushing from their mouths. The shattered heavens became a whitish golden color, but their eyes were filled with despair. It's over. The spear that we used to crush the heavens has shattered. No. Are we going to lose just like that? It wasn't easy for us to make it this far. How could the heavenly light goddess turn the tables on us just like that? In the face of the heavenly light goddess, an irrepressible sense of powerlessness welled up in their hearts. She was too powerful, to the point of no return. No matter how hard they tried, the heavenly light goddess would be able to shatter all of their efforts with a single slap, leaving no trace behind. And Lin, Tina hurtled toward Lin, and a peculiar light erupted from the divine mirror world sword in her hand as she tried to break through the light prison that was trapping Lin. The divine light goddess also flicked a finger at Tina upon seeing this. Countless rays of primordial light suddenly appeared around Tina. Tina flapped her wings and tried to leap out of the encirclement, but the speed of the light prison's construction was much faster than her. In the blink of an eye, it had turned into an impenetrable cage that cut off all the energy connections. Roar! At the same time, a five-color vermilion bird revolved around the true dragon, bringing with it boundless dragon sparrow origin flames as it crashed toward the divine light goddess just as she was about to attack Tina. Bam! The two holy beasts collided with one another, and an unprecedented shockwave erupted forth. This was a collision that was powerful enough to crush a god of creation. The transcendent and peerlessly domineering dragon sparrow origin flames instantly blasted heaven and earth into an inky black hole. The woman in the jade dress ignited her blood essence and unleashed her most powerful attack against the heavenly light goddess. However, at the center of the explosion, at the center of the inky black hole, the streak of light remained completely unmoved. It was so dazzling and so unshakable. The heavenly light goddess wanted to crush Su Xiaolan with a single slap. However, when she thought of Enlin, she casually flicked her wrist and continued to imprison the woman who had just stunned the entire universe. After doing all this, the heavenly light goddess didn't continue to attack the heaven-crushing Glaze Palace. Instead, she looked up into the heavens and looked down upon the Tai Chu continent from the heavens. Billions of living beings in the various worlds appeared before her eyes. It was as if she were a supreme god looking down upon the mortal world. Omniscient and omnipotent, she controlled everything. Regardless of whether they were as insignificant as mortals or as profound as gods of creation, none of the living beings in this world posed any threat to her. She could do anything she wanted to. Now, then it's time for me to complete my mission. The heavenly light goddess stood at the pinnacle of the sky. Chapter 2387. The Daqian phenomenon behind the light goddess began to merge with heaven and earth. After the light of one thought fused with the boundless phenomenon behind her, her control over heaven and earth became even more powerful. Not only could she observe everything in this world, but she could also control the entire universe. The power of the true form of Tao is even more powerful than I imagined. The light goddess smiled as she slowly raised the damaged sword of the heavenly Tao in her hand. In this state, I can annihilate the entire human race. Ding! The blade of the sword vibrated, and an unimaginably sharp light appeared over the entire Tai Chu continent as sword intent swept toward the living beings on the ground below. The kingdom of the 9 states, the Buddhist kingdom of the West, the human settlements in the infinite realm of stars, the Zhanqi continent, Earth. Wherever a human appeared, the light in the sky transformed into a sword intent that hung upside down in the sky. An indescribable sense of impending doom enveloped the bodies of all humans at this moment. The feeling of being controlled by light also appeared in their bodies at the same time. From a celestial arch of the 9 states to the crying babies, no one was spared. With my divine light, illuminate the myriad worlds. Golden blood slowly flowed from the light goddess body, forming a golden divine seal before her, which connected the light of the Tao of destruction. A powerful connection began to form. At this moment, the vast majority of humans on the Tai Chu continent knew that the heaven-crushing sect had lost this battle, and they were about to face death. Some people wept bitter tears. Some people hugged the people important to them. And some people fled frantically, trying to find a place where there was no light, but light was everywhere. Nuwa stood in the sky with an extremely dark expression. She discovered that all of the worlds she had created, regardless of whether they were great worlds or small worlds, were enshrouded by a pure white light, and the power of the light swords was accumulating. Is the light goddess trying to kill all of the humans in one go? How can she do this? How can she do this? Nuwa discovered that she was unable to stop the invasion of light, and all of the humans in the world were like fish waiting to be slaughtered. In particular, a sense of despair and powerlessness welled up in her heart when she saw little Hong Ling, who was blessed by the heavenly Tao, being targeted by the light swords. The power of the light goddess had already exceeded Nuwa's imagination. Tao Lord Luya and the exalted celestial of Tao and virtue both had solemn looks on their faces as well. They racked their brains for a way to counter the power of light, but they were unable to find a way to resist it in a short period of time. Enlin, who was trapped in the light prison, could only watch helplessly as everything unfolded before his eyes. The only fortunate thing was that he and Su Xiaolan were not locked by the lightsaber. The goddess of light even gave him a meaningful look, as if hinting at something. Perhaps both he and Su Xiaolan would be able to survive this disaster. He and Su Xiaolan could stay together forever and even witness the birth of a new human race. But was this really the result he wanted? There is no death in life or death. The holy light is eternal. The goddess of light stood alone at the top of the vault of heaven, her fingers interlocked like a pious maiden. She closed her eyes, and the divine seal in front of her shone brightly. No, don't. Chun endured the severe injuries and pressed his palms against the ground. The heaven-crushing array that was fading away suddenly erupted with an unprecedented light. Energy madly gathered and formed the black and white heaven-crushing spear. The goddess of light shot a cold glance at Chun and stomped her foot on the ground. Boom! Golden light rippled for millions of kilometers. Countless sinister golden cracks instantly appeared on the boundless earth. The heaven-crushing array constructed by the black vein patterns directly exploded, and the black and white heaven-crushing spear also shattered. Chun was severely injured by the terrifying backlash and fell to the ground again. All of this was accomplished in the blink of an eye by the goddess of light. The last hope of hundreds of millions of humans was completely snuffed out. They all fell into despair. They looked up at the lightsaber in the sky, which seemed as if it wanted to send them to their deaths. They had nowhere to run and could only stand there and wait for death. Lin tried everything, but he was unable to break out of the light prison. Sigh. He let out a long sigh. The sorrow in his eyes couldn't be concealed no matter what. He looked at Su Xiaolan, who was also trapped in the light prison, a little reluctantly. The woman in green was also staring at him, and tears suddenly appeared in her limpid eyes. Su Xiaolan seemed to have guessed what Lin wanted to do. She shook her head incessantly and even begged, "No, Lin, don't be like this. We will find a way. There must be another way." A bitter smile appeared on Lin's face. "There's no time. I thought I would be able to turn the situation around and find a way to live up to the expectations of all living beings, and I really can't stand by and watch everyone else die in front of me aside from you and me." And Lin slowly raised the evil slaying sword in his hand. "I'm sorry, little Xia. You tried so hard to help me, but I still failed." The inky black sword trembled violently, as if it was struggling against something. However, its master's will was superior to the sword's blade. The black blade tore through the air and pierced into the white-robed man's heart. Blood instantly stained his white robe red. The sword intent instantly exploded within the man's body. "No!" Su Xiaolan screamed as she waved her sword with all her might at the light prison before her. All of the heaven-crushing sect members' eyes widened with incredulity as they stared at the scenes unfolding before their eyes. The man who was hailed as the #1 war god on the Tai Chu continent had stabbed a sword into his own heart. What was he doing? Was he trying to commit suicide? Jine and Lin, Tina stared blankly at the man who had stabbed a sword into his own chest. Yiling knelt on Xiao Zai's dragon back, and her dagger hand trembled uncontrollably. The celestial Arch, Chong, Yi, and the others were also rooted to the spot upon seeing Lin stab his evil-slaying sword into his own heart. They had even completely forgotten about the lethal light sword hanging above their heads. Xin Yuan Cheng, Su Qinyan, Lu Qianhuan, and the others were also staring at the bloodstained man on the Dao Plaza screen, and their minds went completely blank as a terrifying thought occurred to them. All of the living beings on the Tai Chu continent were astonished by the scenes unfolding before their eyes. The goddess of light's expression, which had remained completely expressionless ever since she had entered her true form of Tao, finally changed in that instant. The divine seal before her began to glow with a blinding light. At this moment, the terrifying sword intent had already torn apart Lin's body, meridians, and consciousness, instantly plunging him into a near-death state. Ding dong. Detected that the host has entered a near-death state. Are you willing to sacrifice 1/5 of your life force? You will receive unimaginable power. Note, the host only has 1/5 of his life force remaining. After the sacrifice, the power will disappear and the host's life force will be completely erased. A multiple-choice question appeared in Lin's mind. At this moment, he could clearly hear the sound of his own heartbeat, as well as the cries of his friends in Xiaolan. He could also sense the fluctuations of light. Images of his father flashed through his mind. Images of Xinyuan Cheng, Su Qinyun, Dabai, Xiaohong, Lan Xiaoni, and the others flashed through his mind. There were too many beings in this world that needed his protection. Sacrificing his life for the survival of the entire human race was a very worthwhile decision. However, Lin's heart throbbed with pain as he looked at the woman in a jade dress, who was sobbing uncontrollably. After he died, everything would leave him. He wasn't the type of person who would give up his life for no reason. However, even though he was extremely reluctant to do so, he knew what he had to do. Tears also welled up in Lin's eyes as he looked at the woman, but he didn't know what to say. "I'm willing. Sacrifice your life force." Chapter 23:88. Deathly silence ensued. A voice reverberated throughout the entire world, and Lin's heart stopped beating at this moment. Everything seemed to have come to a standstill. An inky black divine seal appeared on Lin's forehead. The divine seal was constructed from 5 dark inscriptions, and it exuded an aura that was eternal and ruled over all things. Lin's aura completely changed. It was no longer as domineering and sharp as before, as if he were a monarch who could control all darkness. At this moment, he was like an existence that had transcended beyond this world. He was completely devoid of any threatening aura, and his eyes were so dark that it was impossible to read his thoughts. A series of ribbon-like darkness emanated from his body. It was extremely beautiful, and it was as if a black satin flower had blossomed around his body. The cage constructed from the light of origin, which was the source of all things, began to twist and warp under the pressure of the black flower before it was quickly engulfed. In the blink of an eye, the despairing cage of light was engulfed by the black flower. And Lin stood at the center of the black flower and pulled out the evil-slaying sword that had pierced through his heart. He then turned toward the woman in black, who was still in shock. "Why? I had already decided to spare you and your Tao partner. Why did you make this choice? You clearly didn't have to die." The light goddess was perplexed, and Lin slashed his sword through the air, and a circular sword intent instantly proliferated for over 5,000 kilometers, shattering the cage of light that was imprisoning Su Xiaolan and Tina. "You underestimate the importance of my friends and family in my heart." And Lin's eyes were dark and profound as he looked up at the woman in black. "Light, you forced me to do this. There's no turning back now. Today is the day you die." And Lin walked toward the light goddess, and each and every step he took transformed the space beneath his feet into an inky black hole. This was absolute nothingness, as if God had erased a piece of this world with an eraser. His white robe was like snow, and his black sword was like ink. A man walked toward the light with an indomitable will under the gaze of billions of living beings. The goddess of light's expression changed drastically. Her whole body shone brightly, and sword energy surged in the sky. She wanted to speed up the punishment on the billions of humans. However, at this moment, the inky black, evil-slaying sword had already pierced through the void like a bolt of dark lightning, piercing into the divine seal condensed from the blood of the light goddess. The darkness exploded like a ball. At this moment, heaven and earth seemed to have lost all its light. When light reappeared, the divine seal in front of the goddess of light had already completely disappeared. Even her perfect body had been punctured by the evil-slaying sword, leaving a pitch-black hole in it. "You still want to divert your attention to harming other human beings in front of me." And Lin held his evil-slaying sword as he looked down at the light goddess. All of the living beings were dumbstruck. The reversal in battle prowess was simply too quick. Just a moment ago, the divine light goddess was looking down on the entire universe and looking down on the god of creation stage beings like ants. Now, however, and Lin was able to pierce through the invincible heavenly light goddess with a single sword strike. Could it be that stabbing one's heart will make one stronger? A heaven-crushing sect member murmured to himself. Everything had changed because of Lin's suicidal behavior. Thinking back to how the divine light goddess's nature-defying battle prowess had also been unleashed by stabbing her own heart. With all of these coincidences coming together, it was no wonder that everyone would think this way. However, most of the human beings were thinking back to what the divine light goddess had said. You don't have to die. They didn't want to die, but Lin was going to sacrifice his own life to save them. An indescribable sense of tragedy welled up in all of their hearts. Su Xiaolan stared at the man's back, and her heart throbbed with pain. There were many times when she wanted to charge toward Lin, but she was afraid that she would drag Lin down with her, so she forced herself to a halt. The only thing she could do was stare at Lin's back in silence, as she endured unimaginable torment. Sigh, and Lin still came to this. Lord Luya shook his head in resignation. Is this fate? Did he predict this from the very beginning? The heavenly lord of Tao and virtue heaved a faint sigh, as if he was lamenting something. An unimaginable burst of light suddenly exploded forth. Lin was forced back by the burst of light, and a scorching sensation radiated from his body. At our level, we can't fight here. Lin surveyed his surroundings. He knew that if he were to fight the divine light goddess here, just the shock waves from their battle would be enough to crush the entire kingdom of the 9 states, and even the entire Taichu continent. With this in mind, he unleashed another sword strike toward the sky. Heaven Splitter! Boom! Sword intent soared into the sky, engulfing the surrounding light of absolute beginning. An unimaginable explosion rang out. A black hole began to appear at the pinnacle of the heavens, within which countless stars were flashing. Lord Lu Ya's eyes widened. This is the boundless realm of stars in the outside world. The absolute beginning barrier established by Pangu was broken by him with a single sword strike. Lin turned toward the divine light goddess. Let's go fight outside. The divine light goddess' expression darkened. Of course, she didn't want to fight outside. She wanted nothing more than a fight with Lin here and drag the entire human race down with her. Lin seemed to have guessed what the divine light goddess was thinking, and he took a step forward as a terrifying black tornado revolved around his evil-slaying sword. Roar! Lin unleashed a terrifying tornado, which engulfed the heavenly light goddess from the bottom up. All of the light of absolute beginning that came into contact with the tornado was pulverized. The heavenly light goddess made a hand seal, and it was as if her body had been embedded into the great Tao of heaven and earth. Her light was eternal and inextinguishable as she stood in the sky. Immovable God! The black tornado crashed into the divine light goddess body, but it was unable to move her in the slightest. However, before the divine light goddess had a chance to do anything, Lin appeared at the location where the black tornado was, which was right beneath the divine light goddess' feet. There was a black vortex in his palm, but upon closer inspection, one could see countless galaxies being born and destroyed within the vortex, as well as countless dimensions being annihilated by the vortex. Darkness, multidimensional seismic explosion. Extreme vibrations and propulsion force erupted from the black vortex in his palm. It ignored matter, energy, laws, and even the great Tao of heaven and earth as it twisted and compressed everything around it. Even all of the light in the surroundings was twisted and pushed toward the black hole at the very top. The immovable God, the divine light goddess, was not spared either. This power was too powerful and too fast. Her slender foot was struck by Lin's palm, and the boundless black explosion tore through all of her defenses. Her beautiful body was tossed out of the Taichu continent by the multidimensional seismic explosion like a rock. Oomph. I'll toss you out if you don't listen to me. And Lin spoke in a cold voice. His body flashed, and he flew out of the Taichu continent after the divine light goddess, leaving behind a bunch of dumbstruck living beings. And Lin was extremely domineering in this state, and all of the despairing humans felt as if they had been vindicated. Everyone stared at the white-robed figure disappearing into the black hole. He was so indomitable and courageous, carrying the hopes of all living beings on the Tai Chu continent as he sacrificed himself for the final battle. This was probably the demeanor of the #1 war god on the Tai Chu continent. This scene would definitely be engraved in the hearts of all living beings. All of them looked up at him and prayed in their hearts, hoping that the #1 war god in their hearts would return in victory. Chapter 2389. In the center of the boundless realm of stars, a gigantic black hole suddenly appeared. Immediately afterward, a terrifying shockwave erupted from within the black hole, and an engulfment power countless times more terrifying than a black hole twisted everything around it. A woman enshrouded in light was ejected from the black hole like a piece of trash. It was as if engulfment and ejection were mutually exclusive. The more powerful the engulfment power, the more easily the woman was ejected. This woman was none other than the heavenly light goddess. The heavenly light goddess was ejected hundreds of millions of kilometers away by the black hole. A white-robed man emerged from the black hole and followed closely behind her. The dark, multidimensional seismic explosion in his hand didn't stop as he continued to push the woman toward the farthest reaches of the starry sky. And Lin's attack was extremely violent. He focused all of his power on pushing the heavenly light goddess as far away as he could. Before they knew it, the two of them had already flown several galaxies away. Around a wasteland star system, the heavenly light goddess body erupted with a light that was countless times more dazzling than a star, and she finally managed to block Lin's dark, multidimensional seismic explosion. Light is eternal, and all things shall obey. The light goddess let loose an enraged roar as she gripped the air with one hand, upon which 13 gargantuan stars broke free from the gravitational pull of the eternal star before hurtling toward Lin like a divine cannon of destruction. Lin could even see the boundless mountain ranges and vast oceans that crashed into the star system. It was extremely vast in the eyes of humans, and it was extremely terrifying when it crashed into the star system. Lin threw a single punch toward the oncoming star system. Bam! A boundless force shattered the space around him. The gigantic star system was instantly punctured from the center by a terrifying force. Even its core was shattered, and it exploded into countless scorching torrents before being pulverized by the terrifying shockwave. Lin unleashed 13 punches in a row, one planet after another, and all 13 stars before him were pulverized in the blink of an eye. Rumble! An incomparably scorching energy suddenly surged toward Lin. The goddess of light waved her hand, and the stars in the galaxy smashed down with a destructive aura. Endless high-energy burned everything around them. The energy was equivalent to the energy produced by tens of thousands of nuclear bombs exploding at the same time. Not only that, but the primordial light, the origin of all things, also shone on the sun, making the sun even more dazzling and terrifying. The stardust floating in the surroundings were all burned into the most primitive light before disappearing. Light divine art, exploding nova. The goddess of light threw the star at Lin at a very fast speed, and the huge sun blocked all of Lin's escape routes. In the face of this explosive energy, Lin's expression did not change. He punched out again, but this time, this punch was filled with the darkness of nirvanic extermination. The fist that was even deeper than a black hole collided with the sun, turning into a silent collision. In an instant, the boundless light and heat from the sun seemed to have disappeared, and it completely sank into pitch-black nothingness. When Lin retracted his fist, there was one less sun in the infinite star domain. The space in front of Lin had become a vast expanse of nothingness. Not only had all of the energy and matter disappeared, even the spatial dimension and laws had completely disappeared. He stepped on the void and leaped in front of the goddess of light at an incredible speed. His fist released a darkness that was enough to cover thousands of stars. Light, if this is all you've got, I'll kill you with this move. A massive black lotus appeared beneath their feet. The black lotus blossomed for billions of kilometers, dimming the light of hundreds of thousands of stars. From extremely far away, one could see that there was a lotus flower that was completely missing from the vast expanse of stars in the sky. When Enlin's fist fell, one could see that there were black lines running through the starry night sky, and all of the stars on the black lines had disappeared. All of the gods of creation's hearts stirred upon seeing this. Heavenly monarch Beiluo, the extreme doubt demonic lion, the azure dragon, the white tiger, and the Xian Wu could see through the speed of light, and all of them discovered that extremely terrifying energy fluctuations had erupted in the starry sky near the Taichu continent, making the entire starry sky darken. This created a massive stir among all of the pinnacle gods in the realm of stars. All of the powerful beings turned toward Enlin. At this moment, the power of the Black Lotus had already converged into Enlin's fist. Extreme darkness, eternal silent lotus. He launched a fist toward the goddess of light's face at a speed that transcended the spatial dimension, and his fist struck the goddess of light at the exact same instant. The goddess of light reacted extremely quickly, and she imbued her sword of the heavenly Tao with the absolute primordial light to transcend the spatial dimension before striking Enlin's earth-shattering fist. Bam! The purest absolute primordial light fused perfectly with the heavenly Tao of the ancient Taichu realm, creating a unique cycle of reincarnation from which unprecedented power erupted. The light was tens of thousands of times more powerful than the explosion of a star, and all of the stars in the surrounding realm of stars were bathed in light. The stars that were too close to Enlin were all automatically assimilated into countless photons, which shone with their most dazzling brilliance. This was the goddess of light's instantaneous extraction of the power of the surrounding stars for her own use in order to deal Enlin a fatal blow. However, in the next instant, the extremely powerful goddess of light and all of her energy were engulfed by the lotus on Enlin's fist, and the surrounding area transformed into a boundless world of black lotus. Enlin's eternal silent lotus could create a world with a lotus, which could drag the enemy into the world before using darkness to end that world, thereby destroying the goddess of light. He had indeed dragged the goddess of light into the world of black lotus, but he discovered that his darkness was unable to completely suppress the goddess of light's attack. This was the first time that he was unable to do as he pleased after sacrificing his life force to obtain invincible power. Instead, he encountered extremely powerful resistance. The goddess of light's resistance was extremely intense, and Lin wanted to destroy the Black Lotus and the goddess of light within the world of Black Lotus. However, the light broke through the Black Lotus and tore through the petals. Explode, and Lin's fist shook, and a world of Black Lotus exploded. The extreme darkness engulfed the light that was trying to break through the Black Lotus, and the aftermath of the darkness even devoured dozens of star systems in the surroundings. A beam of light flew out from the darkness of the explosion, and it was in an extremely sorry state. The goddess of light's figure appeared again. Her clothes were in tatters from being devoured, and even her perfect divine body had pitch-black, incomplete parts. Darkness was wreaking havoc. She panted heavily and looked at Enlin with fear. The darkness on her body was erased by the pure and infinite light in her body, turning into pure photons and dissipating. The goddess of light's injuries instantly recovered, but she did not feel the slightest bit complacent. She had never thought that she would be suppressed by the man in front of her after releasing her Tao form. And Lin was actually even more surprised. He felt that he was now an omnipotent god of war. This was not an exaggeration. There were only things that he could not think of, and there was nothing that he could not do. He even possessed the ability of a true god of omniscience and omnipotence. If a god of creation stood in front of him, he would be able to kill them with a single slap. However, even in such a state, he was unable to severely wound the goddess of light, even after attacking her with all his might. And Lin did not hesitate much, and his body flashed as he charged toward the goddess of light again. It was futile to think too much about other things now. The only thing he could do was to fight. The goddess of light waved the broken sword of the heavenly Tao and also charged toward Enlin without a word. An unprecedentedly terrifying battle erupted in the boundless starry sky. Chapter 2390. Boom, boom, boom. Both Enlin and the light goddess unleashed their respective divine techniques. Darkness and light were two of the most essential powers of light and darkness, and they clashed in a frenzy, pulverizing all of the nearby galaxies into nothingness. Not a single inch of the surrounding space was left intact. Terrifying energy blasts lit up the entire realm of stars like supernova explosions. All of the gods of creation were paying close attention to the epic battle taking place in the realm of stars. A chill ran down their spines as they looked at the intense clash between light and darkness. In the realm of Azure Dragon in the east, cold sweat poured down Patriarch Azure Dragon's forehead. He had just been stripped of his holy birth by Su Xiaolan, and now he was facing a battle that threatened to destroy the entire realm of stars. He didn't know what to say. That darkness, is that Mr. Enlin's power? How long has it been? Mr. Enlin's power has already skyrocketed to this extent. Azure Dragon was able to maintain his composure as a senior in the past, and he didn't back down even when facing Enlin. However, he was a little worried that Enlin would accidentally kill him. The power of the two of them was on a completely different level. He even recalled the awe he felt when he watched his seniors and elders sparring with one another. There was no way he could compare himself to them. Azure Dragon was mentally prepared. After all, he had witnessed the power of darkness. However, the gods of creation like Heavenly Monarch North Chun, the extreme Tao Holy Falcon, and the Dark River Immortal Whale were different. Aside from astonishment, they were also struck by fear. Holy Falcon, the guy fighting in the distance gives me a very familiar feeling. I feel like I've seen him somewhere before. The Dark River Immortal Whale used a special talisman to contact the god of creation, the extreme Tao Holy Falcon. You feel the same way too? I also feel like I've seen him somewhere before. How about you go and see who he is? The extreme Tao Holy Falcon asked. The Dark River Immortal Whale chuckled coldly. Are you asking me to die? The extreme Tao Holy Falcon looked at the hundreds of stars in the distance that had completely disappeared into the realm of stars, then at the terrifying energy that seemed to have come from the Big Bang and Big Annihilation, and it suddenly felt like the Dark River Immortal Whale's words made a lot of sense. Now that he was here to watch the melon, he would be courting death. Never in its wildest dreams would the extreme Tao Holy Falcon have thought that a god of creation, the paramount god of the beast tribe, would have to worry about being killed by the shock waves of a battle. None of the gods of creation were idiots. None of them dared to approach the center of the battle between Enlin and the heavenly light goddess. Some of the gods of creation who were closer to the battle had even started to move toward the edge of the realm of stars. They wanted nothing more than to run to the outskirts of the realm of stars so that they could hide in some safe corner and tremble in fear. As for the Tao integration stage, super mighty figures in the realm of stars, their senses were not as acute as those of the gods of creation. All they could sense was that the great Tao of heaven and earth, as well as their own divine Tao, could crumble at any moment. This feeling was even more terrifying than that of the gods of creation. They didn't know what was happening, but they felt like they were going to die. It was like a horror story. To these extremely sensitive, super mighty figures, this was unimaginable torture. At this moment, in a certain large galaxy in the center of the realm of stars, tens of thousands of stars suddenly erupted with extremely terrifying light. Immediately afterward, they traversed through space in an incredible manner before converging at a certain place. That place was where the light goddess was located. The light goddess waved a hand through the air as if she were tossing sand, and the countless stars in the sky transformed into suns that crashed down mercilessly toward Enlin. Paramount heavenly god technique, light meteor, tens of thousands of suns appeared mercilessly around Enlin, just like that. Absolute light and heat exploded in this place. This was a power that could instantly annihilate a god of creation along with its essence of creation. Any power would undergo a qualitative change when it reached the extreme. Tens of thousands of suns converged and collided, creating a shockwave of energy that could even affect the entire realm of stars. All the living beings in the entire star domain felt a burning sensation at the same time. This was especially true for Enlin, who was situated at the center of the tens of thousands of suns. These suns were not just crashing toward him. Instead, they were self-detonating right in front of him. What would happen if tens of thousands of suns self-detonated at the same time? The resulting shockwave could even destroy an entire large star system. Not only was Enlin enduring extreme heat and light, but he was also enduring a boundless amount of matter that even the darkness was unable to devour in a short time. The matter produced by the instantaneous explosion of tens of thousands of suns even simulated the Big Bang, expanding and distorting space and time to give birth to countless dimensions and laws of nature. Enlin had initially wanted to retaliate, but in the face of the extremely terrifying shockwave of light and heat, he had no spare energy to retaliate. As such, he could only do his best to release the darkness around his body to protect himself. No matter how much light and heat there was, he would be able to absorb it all. Even if the Big Bang were to occur, he would still be able to maintain his eternal state. As for what happened in the outside world, that was not something he could control. All he could do now was protect himself. The terrifying explosion completely rocked the entire realm of stars. It was unimaginable just how terrifying the shockwave would be if it spread outward. In any case, all of the gods of creation who were secretly observing the battle were scared ***. What the ****CK? Tens of thousands of stars exploded in an instant. You can fight like this. The holy beast Xianwu in the extreme north of the realm of stars was so scared that it couldn't help but quickly try to predict the direction of this battle, as well as the impact that this battle could have. In the end, its shell exploded from the backlash, and it almost fainted as it spat out a mouthful of blood. What was most shocking to it was that even though it was suffering from such a severe backlash, there was only one result, and that was ***CKU. What kind of powerful beings are fighting? Holy ***T, I'm so scared. Xianwu was so scared that its limbs and head retracted into its shell, and it didn't know what to do. The entire realm of stars had already descended into a state of panic. All of the mighty beings here were clearly unable to withstand the impact of the battle between Enlin and the heavenly light goddess. To their dismay, they discovered that they didn't even have the courage to voice their protests. They were afraid that they would be slapped to death by the heavenly light goddess and the heavenly light goddess. At this moment, the battle between Enlin and the heavenly light goddess was still far from over. At the center of the explosion of tens of thousands of suns, there was a darkness that was like the origin point, eternal and inextinguishable, so hard that no technique could penetrate it. Enlin was hiding within it. In the next instant, a sharp sword suddenly flew toward him from afar. This sword was imbued with boundless light and extreme killing intent, and it unleashed the power of the heavenly Tao and the power of the heavenly gods to the extreme. Rip! The source of darkness around Enlin was violently torn apart by the damaged heavenly Tao sword. Chapter 2391. Enlin's shell of darkness was torn open by the sword blade, and he could also see the light goddess expression, which was suffused with an extreme chill and killing intent. The other party's broken sword of the heavenly Tao pierced through the crack. Enlin didn't have time to defend or dodge. The blade was so big that it was like a supreme world was crashing down. The sword energy was so strong that it was like light was everywhere. Rip! The blade pierced through his heart and came out of his body. A heart-wrenching pain spread throughout his body. He felt as if the power of a world was exploding inside his body. The goddess of light smiled. "You're finished, Rip." The sharp dark wheel slashed. The goddess of light smile was still on her face when her head fell off her neck. The dark wheel was the Dark Nine Origins wheel formed by Enlin's divine Tao of darkness and the 9 peak level essences. The Dark Nine Origins wheel drew a perfect arc in the air and was about to continue. The goddess of light's body suddenly erupted with an unimaginable light, more dazzling than the explosion of tens of thousands of suns. It was as if some kind of power had accumulated to the extreme. Boom! The goddess of light exploded into boundless primordial light. Enlin's body expanded as the primordial light shone on him. Boom! Enlin also exploded into boundless darkness. The entire supermassive galaxy once again turned into a battlefield where light and darkness collided and fought crazily. Countless stars and stars were turned into ashes in this terrifying battle. Enlin and the goddess of light didn't use any fancy tricks. Both sides decided to use the most primitive and simplest method to determine the winner. That was to see which side was stronger, darkness or light. Both sides had unleashed their powers of the heavenly gods to the maximum. The goddess of light revealed her divine body of light, which was even larger than a galaxy. Billions of rays of primordial light radiated across the entire galaxy. Everything in the world appeared in this light. There is light, so there is everything. The goddess of light's holy and ethereal voice spread across the universe. The supreme power of the gods even affected the entire primordial universe. Phenomena of light appeared in the skies of every planet in the infinite galaxies. At this moment, Enlin was crushed by the boundless matter, life, energy, laws, and Tao insights of the universe. He felt as if he had been abandoned by the entire world. All the visible and invisible existences were trying to obliterate his existence. Light was the origin of the concept of existence. In other words, this was the power of the concept of the universe. The goddess of light looked at the darkness and nothingness that kept swelling and colliding with her, and said calmly, "Give up struggling. You can't beat me, because I am the meaning of this world." The empty universe was originally meaningless, but from the moment the first ray of light was born, everything was truly defined, and countless possibilities were born. Only then did the universe truly possess the meaning of existence. Light is the source of all things. Its appearance defines time and space, giving the universe the concept of existence, the explosion of energy, the appearance of matter, the construction of laws, the derivation of thousands of phenomena. Light energy stimulates the expansion and reproduction of the universe until life is born one by one. It continues to develop and advance, giving birth to hope and infinite possibilities. The goddess of light crossed her arms, and when the light bloomed in front of her, it gave birth to endless phenomena. It was an eternal existence and possibility that life could not give up. As far as the eyes of countless living beings could see, the entire sky was enshrouded by a peculiar light. With a single thought, all things would shine. If there is no light, then everything before us would not exist. You would also not exist. A single word determined life and death. A single word determined the universe. Enlin felt like his existence was quickly becoming insubstantial, as if he was unable to receive the approval of light and was about to completely sever himself from the very source, thereby making him disappear from this world forever. Interesting, a battle between paramount heavenly god powers has escalated to a battle between universal concepts. The white-robed man appeared from the darkness and looked at the dazzling galaxy of stars before his eyes. His eyes gradually became profound and tranquil. Light has indeed created everything I know, and it has indeed given birth to all the possibilities and hopes of the universe. It appears to possess limitless development and a future. But why does life have to walk toward death? Why do mortals have lifespans? Why do Tao integration stage, super mighty figures, and gods of creation have to face tribulations? Why does even the heavenly Tao, which is supposed to be indestructible and indestructible, have to be destroyed one day? Enlin looked at the boundless realm of stars before him. Behind the boundless and dazzling galaxy of stars, there was a boundless expanse of space that was like a blossoming firework, and it was slowly walking toward a cold and tragic decline. Not only life, but everything I know is also walking toward death. Everything is born from the light. Rainbow clouds, rainbow light, life, sun, but rainbow clouds are easy to disperse, and rainbow light is difficult to find. Life flies by, and the sun appears to be eternal, but it will eventually be extinguished. Nothing is eternal, even if you think it is. The moment of their birth is the most beautiful moment, but beauty cannot be maintained forever. Just like this universe, after the explosion, all that remains is cold stardust and deathly nothingness. We are unable to resist this trend, and we are unable to determine its direction. All of our efforts will be futile in the end. What was it that decided their fate? A smile appeared on Lin's face as he looked at the light goddess, who was as massive as a galaxy, yet was still as beautiful as a dream. All things in this world are grand and boundless. You and I were both born of light, but we will forever return to darkness. You are very beautiful, but you will also grow old. Everything will lead to darkness. Light, you will also move toward me. This world is very fair. Everything, in the end, belongs to the darkness. The moment light blooms is truly beautiful, so beautiful that all things in the world praise and yearn for light. Therefore, they have all overlooked one thing. That is, light. And even the process of the birth and destruction of the universe, compared to the process of darkness, is actually a fleeting moment. The black ball in Lin's hand began to expand at an incredible rate, and everything it came into contact with completely disappeared, leaving behind only the deepest darkness and the purest nothingness. The infinite radiance of the primordial light was erased by the darkness. In the universe, the Tao of heaven and earth trembled. The sea of light above the heads of billions of living beings was shrouded in the purest darkness. Everything fell into a deathly silence. Light is infinitely good, but darkness is eternal. As soon as he finished speaking, the vast and boundless starry sky seemed to have been extinguished, and there was no light. The world was devoid of light. The universe was completely dark. Chapter 2392. A battle of universal concepts was actually quite soundless. However, this was far too terrifying for the countless living beings in the realm of stars. A while ago, the sky had suddenly brightened, which was somewhat acceptable. After all, not only did the light appear harmless, but it was also a little comfortable. However, in the next second, the sky suddenly became the purest darkness. Not only that, but everything around them also disappeared. This feeling, aside from the fact that their consciousness was still present, they actually felt no different from being dead. This was way too King terrifying. And Lin had accomplished something that could shock all living beings in the entire realm of stars. All of the living beings in the realm of stars, from gods of creation to ordinary living beings, would never forget this peculiar experience for the rest of their lives. Thankfully, this dark phenomenon only lasted for an instant. In the next instant, the sky returned to normal. Day was still day. Night was still night. However, this was a night with stars, and it wasn't as terrifying as it had been before. After this upheaval, the entire realm of stars seemed to have returned to normal. However, the galaxy wherein Lin and the light goddess were battling had already been reduced to a vast expanse of dark and devoid of light. Even countless laws had been blasted into smithereens, let alone matter and energy. Both darkness and light had dimmed. The light goddess, who was as vast as an entire galaxy, had already disappeared. All of the gods of creation in the realm of stars held their breaths as they surveyed the realm of stars with nervous expressions, fearful that something unexpected would happen. They knew that even a sneeze from these two mighty figures would be able to make the entire realm of stars tremble. At this moment, in a certain shattered starry sky, two extremely tiny figures that had once rocked the entire universe had appeared. The man wore a set of white robes, and the inky black, evil-slaying sword in his hand had already pierced into the woman's chest. These two were none other than Lin and the light goddess. The light goddess' eyes dimmed, and the heavenly Tao sword in her hand had already been sliced in half. Furthermore, it was dissipating at a rate discernible to the naked eye. Her divinity was also quickly fading away. The power of light flowed into Enlin's body through the evil-slaying sword before being engulfed by Enlin's divine Tao of darkness. "Light, I won this battle," Enlin said. The goddess of light raised her beautiful eyes, smiled, and said softly, "You won? What did you win? Aren't you going to return to the heavenly Tao with me? Aren't you going to bid farewell to everything you love and everything you can't give up?" "But I saved everything I loved." Enlin shook his head. "Did you really save everyone, including the person you value the most?" The goddess of light looked at Enlin. Looking at the man's sudden pain in his days, she smiled with some sarcasm. "Don't comfort yourself with the reason of sacrificing yourself for others. You and I are both individuals with strong individual consciousness, and we know the meaning of life better. There's nothing left if you die. So what if you save the world? For your individual consciousness, this is an eternal separation, an eternal non-existence, an eternal darkness. So I lost." The goddess of light smiled happily. "But you didn't win either. On the contrary, you will lose everything, just like me." Enlin's struggle and pain only lasted for a moment, and he quickly calmed down. "That's right. I'm very unwilling to give up. In fact, my heart is filled with pain." Black light erupted from the evil-slaying sword as dark ripples swept through hundreds of galaxies. The power of the Tao of Final Tao was unleashed to the extreme, engulfing the goddess of light's power of Tao in a frenzy. The shredding and stripping of Tao power transformed into indescribable pain, making even the light goddess of light tremble uncontrollably, and she even wailed in pain. "But you and I are still different. I made my choice, and I've successfully made it, but you didn't. You let down the heavens, but I won't let down all living beings." Enlin looked on calmly at the scenes unfolding before his eyes. He watched as the most powerful woman in the universe slowly fell before his eyes. Darkness had defeated light in the end. This didn't mean that the concept of darkness was superior to the concept of light. Enlin knew that this was related to the fact that his power of darkness had absorbed the power of the other three paramount heavenly gods, which resulted in his power of Tao being slightly superior, which also decided the final outcome. The light goddess divine Halo had completely collapsed, and she was like a severely wounded woman as blood flowed from the corners of her lips, and her perfect body's life force quickly began to wither and collapse. She was like a dazzling flower that had once dazzled the entire universe, only to wither and die in the end. The light goddess knew that she was going to die, and her inky black eyes became extremely clear and gentle, as if she were talking to a friend. "Enlin, do you regret this? To be honest, I really didn't plan to kill you and the divine Phoenix Maiden. You two have already transcended beyond the scope of the human race. I only wanted to destroy the rest of the human race and ruin the heaven-crushing plan. After that, I'll reconstruct the heavenly Tao, and you can actually be with the divine Phoenix Maiden forever." The light goddess words were like a sharp knife that pierced into Enlin's heart. Enlin's heart throbbed with pain. He could even imagine the time that everyone would be without him. Just how sad would Su Xiaolan be? Su Xiaolan could wait for him for 100 years when everyone thought that he was dead. Su Xiaolan could naturally do even more heartbreaking things for him when he became the heavenly Tao. And little Na, underling Lan, his father, and the others, do you regret this? This was the question that the light goddess was asking him. It was also the question that he was asking himself in the final moments of his life. Do I regret this? Enlin actually didn't have much hesitation. Even though his heart was throbbing with pain, even though he was extremely reluctant, he still shook his head with a smile. "I don't regret this." Even though the light goddess had lost all of her power of Tao, she could still see that Enlin was being very honest. Hence, she faltered slightly as she looked at Enlin with a perplexed expression. "I don't understand," the light goddess said. Compared to Enlin and Su Xiaolan, who had infinite lifespans, the time that they spent with their so-called friends was only a blink of an eye. As for the extinction of the human race, as a god of creation, she could even witness the birth and extinction of the human race several times. Was this really that important to Enlin? Lin recalled all of the past. Little Na's innocence, Big Brother Cheng's sincerity, Susu's cleverness, Dabai's shamelessness, Xiao Hong's laziness, Sister Lu's capriciousness. He couldn't help but smile as he thought about this. You've never encountered a rainbow. Of course you don't know why I cherish it. And Lin looked at the heavenly light goddess as her body gradually disappeared. As a light, you should know this more than a darkness like me. Why is it that you only know that the rainbow will eventually disappear, but you can't understand the happiness I feel when I embrace it? The heavenly light goddess's eyelids trembled slightly, and her eyes shimmered as if she had understood something. Her body transformed into specks of light and disappeared, leaving only her head behind. The woman opened her mouth and finally said what she was thinking. Life really is a very beautiful thing. As her voice fell, the light goddess's body completely disappeared, and Lin looked at the empty void before him and nodded. That's right. Life is really beautiful. Chapter 2393. On the Tai Chu continent. Countless living beings were watching the live stream with tense expressions on their faces. They looked at the inky black hole on the screen, as well as the sea of stars within the hole. They had seen the sea of stars transform into boundless light, and they had also seen darkness engulf the sea of stars before transforming into the deepest darkness. Each and every one of these events struck a chord in everyone's hearts. Even though they couldn't see it with their own eyes, they could sense just how chaotic the realm of stars was. All of the 4-9 Immortal Sect members boarded the Starfire battleship and arrived at the heaven-crushing glazed palace to await the return of their sect leader. Su Xiaolan stood stubbornly at the spot closest to the shattered barrier and stared at the surging starry sky in silence. Destructive, chaotic turbulence wreaked havoc over her body, and her jade barley-inked garment flapped in the wind, making her look like a lone azure lotus that had blossomed in the face of destruction. Xiaolan. Tina pursed her delicate lips as she looked at the green-robed woman. She didn't know what to say to comfort her. In truth, her heart was also in great pain. The pain was unimaginable to the average person, and it was a pain that had been compounded over countless years. In the end, things had still developed to this point. Even after so much time had passed and they had done their best, the result was still the same. She suddenly turned toward the sky. All of the gods of creation had also sensed the changes taking place, and all of them turned toward the heavenly Tao in the sky. The shattered light of origin seemed to have lost some sort of support, and it quickly dissipated into the most basic particles of light between heaven and earth. What did this mean? This meant that the heavenly light goddess had been defeated. He won, and Lin won. Giant and Lin, Big Brother and Wolf. Sect leader is invincible. This was the best outcome for the Tai Chu continent. Some living beings had tears streaming down their faces, while others were extremely excited. However, in the next instant, another change took place. Heaven and earth began to tremor violently, and the heavenly Tao began to explode. Without the support of the light of origin, the heavenly Tao began to crumble again. This was a process that even the light goddess was unable to reverse. It was quite clear that even without the heaven-crushing formation's attacks, the heavenly Tao was unable to maintain its stable state, and it began to self-destruct. The world had fallen into a state of destruction. Chen did not relax in the slightest when he saw this. Instead, he became even more solemn. I've succeeded in crushing the heavens, but my current state. Chen examined his own condition. He wanted to unleash his spotless land, but he found that he was unable to do so. His inner universe had been severely damaged by the heavenly light goddess, and he no longer possessed the basic qualities to complete the final step and ascend to heaven. Chen couldn't help but turn his gaze toward one of the dragon ladies in the heaven-crushing glazed palace. The ancient dragon empress expression faltered slightly upon sensing his gaze. Heavenly disciple of the ancient dragon empress, I'll leave the rest to you. Chen said. Ancient dragon empress. Me? You want me to become heaven? Are you serious? The ancient dragon empress' eyes widened, and she felt like she was dreaming for a split second. Chen nodded seriously. My Tao heart has been tainted, and my essence has been severely damaged. I no longer have the right to become heaven. Comparatively speaking, you have a higher chance of becoming heaven. The ancient dragon empress' eyes trembled. But I'm only at the Tao integration stage. Have you forgotten what I've once taught you? Chen looked at the unconfident dragon lady and said, anything can become heaven. It could be as large as a paramount concept or as small as a speck of dust. As long as you have absolute willpower, you can do it. Believe in yourself. Bring out the same fearless aura you had when you passed the heavenly disciple trial. Don't forget, you're also a heavenly disciple. Chen's words completely enlightened the ancient dragon empress. There was no longer any hesitation or apprehension on her face. Instead, there was a boundless battle intent on her face. That's right. As a heavenly disciple, I've already made preparations. When I need to step forward, I am heaven. A translucent red glow erupted from the ancient dragon empress dragon horn as the peerless aura of the patriarch of all dragons slowly erupted forth. She flew into the sky, and her aura gradually became ethereal and ethereal. The end of all things is the heavens. Embrace the universe and determine the universe. A strange divine symbol appeared on the ancient dragon empress' forehead, and the boundless sea of stars and worlds were reflected in her eyes. A peculiar ripple resonated with a certain frequency in the universe. Look, the one flying toward the heavenly Tao is the ancient dragon empress. My God, is she going to become the heavenly Tao? Is this really going to be okay? Of course. She's the heavenly disciple of our heaven-crushing sect. Which heavenly disciple of our heaven-crushing sect isn't a supremely talented one? She'll definitely succeed. All of the heaven-crushing sect members looked on with scorching light in their eyes, and all of the living beings present were on high alert. The ancient dragon empress' intent to become heaven had already triggered a strange phenomenon in the entire universe. All of the living beings on the Tai Chu continent had received a message from the unseen world. The ancient dragon empress was going to become heaven. A Tai Chu continent, living being becoming heaven right before everyone's eyes was definitely going to be recorded in the history books of the Tai Chu continent. All of a sudden, all of the living beings had their eyes focused on the ancient dragon empress. It could be said that this was definitely the most dazzling moment of the ancient dragon empress' life. There was boundless anticipation, well wishes, concern, and incredulity. All of these emotions were tied to her alone. The ancient dragon empress had gathered the wishes of all living beings in a special method. Her body gradually became insubstantial, and an indescribably extreme Tao realm began to fuse as one with heaven and earth. First, it connected the Purple Star ruins, then the Kingdom of the Nine States, then the eastern part of the Tai Chu continent, then the western part of the Tai Chu continent. The ancient dragon empress body trembled violently. Her insubstantial body suddenly became more substantial before suddenly becoming insubstantial again. All of the living beings present were on tenterhooks upon seeing this. Chen knew that the process of becoming a heaven was extremely perilous, and he spoke to the ancient dragon empress again. Calm your mind and cast aside all distracting thoughts. Accept everything in this world, and you are the sum total of everything in this world. You are the heaven. The ancient dragon empress was enduring a boundless amount of information, and she felt like she was about to explode. She knew that only by fusing perfectly with heaven and earth would she be able to avoid exploding. However, this was difficult to say, and it was even more difficult to put into practice. The ancient dragon empress was enduring an unimaginably terrifying onslaught. This was an onslaught that affected her body, consciousness, Tao realm, and even her entire being. This was a multidimensional trial, and if she didn't perform well in any of the aspects, she would lose everything. This woman, who had the hopes and dreams of countless living beings, had entered an extremely peculiar visualization state. She was on the brink of a mental breakdown as she watched her loved ones die one after another. She watched the evil dragons who supported her wail with anguish as they were completely wiped out. Everything that she cared about, everything that she wanted to protect, had disappeared before her eyes forever. No, no. Tears of blood suddenly flowed from the ancient dragon empress' eyes. This is not the result I want. A heaven like this, a heaven like this. I don't want to be a heaven like this. Her voice fell, and something seemed to crumble. Right before the nervous and expectant eyes of countless living beings, the peerlessly heroic dragon empress suddenly exploded into a cloud of blood mist, and she plummeted from the sky. Chapter 2394. The ancient dragon empress fell from the heavens. All of the living beings present felt their breathing falter. Ancient dragon empress, heavenly disciple. This is a failure. Most of the living beings let out cries of surprise. Some of the living beings with weak hearts had already clutched at their hearts, as if they could stop at any moment. They really couldn't take this kind of stimulation. Shui Yin dashed forward and caught the ancient dragon empress in her arms. She used the power of her ice crystals to seal her near-death wounds. Shui Yin, the ancient dragon empress, opened her eyes with great difficulty. Her face was filled with self-reproach and pain. I'll let you all down. That's enough. Shui Yin shook her head. You've already done your best. The ancient dragon empress was still unable to disguise her guilt and indignation. She turned her gaze toward Chen Chun. Chen Chun also looked at the ancient dragon empress. A comforting smile appeared on his face when he saw that she was still alive. He then turned his gaze toward the sky, and his expression became more and more grave. The heaven-crushing sect's final step had failed. The heavenly Tao had been completely destroyed. The entire heaven and earth was on the brink of destruction. The sky was filled with spatial cracks. Terrifying, chaotic turbulence began to seep out from the cracks, wreaking havoc across heaven and earth. Calamity reappeared. Countless living beings either fled or knelt to the ground in despair. However, they were still staring at the heaven-crushing glazed palace. However, Cyril had already fallen, and the ancient dragon empress, whom they had high hopes for, was on the brink of death. Chen Chun was in a slightly better state, but his life force had been severely damaged, so he couldn't use any of his power. Who else could save this heaven and earth? Even though countless living beings were facing the brink of destruction, they didn't fall into absolute despair. There was still a ball of hope in their hearts, a ball of darkness. They looked at the sky in the live broadcast, waiting for someone to return. A legendary figure that represented the entire Tai Chu continent. Not long after, he seemed to have sensed the destruction of the Tai Chu continent. Within the black hole, the starry sky suddenly surged. A white-robed man slowly walked out from the starry sky. Soon, he appeared in the sky above this realm. At this moment, the chaotic heaven and earth fell silent. The man stood tall and straight with a handsome face. His black eyes were clear and gentle. Looking at the crowd waiting for him, he smiled and said, I didn't disappoint you. I won. Su Xiaolan's eyes were already blurred by tears, but she still stared at the man in white. And Lin, welcome back. All of the 4-9 Immortal Sect disciples and elders also had tears welling up in their eyes. They shouted in unison, Welcome back, Sect Leader and Lin, Sect Leader, unparalleled battle god. Sect Leader, the sun and moon shine together, heaven and earth coexist, undefeated in 10,000 battles. Familiar bootlicking and heartfelt words converged at this moment, shaking the 9 heavens. And Lin could not help but smile when he heard this. He looked at the familiar faces. There were his beloved disciples, his adorable pet beasts, his loyal servants, and many comrades who had fought alongside him. What a wonderful sect this was, and Lin's vision gradually became blurry. He really couldn't bear to part with them. But wasn't he doing this to save such a group of people? All of the 4-9 Immortal Sect members and their sect leader were speechless. It was as if they were bidding farewell. It was also at this moment that a gentle breeze suddenly blew past his face. A jade dress fell into his arms, and he felt a boundless sense of warmth. Su Xiaolan flew toward Enlin and hugged him tightly. Enlin, don't leave me. Promise me, don't leave me again. Don't sacrifice yourself. You've already done enough for this world. Let's live a good life together from now on, okay? Su Xiaolan sobbed as she held onto him tightly, fearful that Enlin would disappear in the blink of an eye. Enlin's expression became extremely gentle, and he also held the woman before him tightly in his arms. All of his reluctance to part with her transformed into a hug as he felt the warmth radiating from her body. My life has been spectacular enough, Enlin suddenly said. The woman in his arms shuddered slightly, and she looked up at the man before her with tears in her eyes as she shook her head relentlessly. No, don't. You said that you're going to be with me for the rest of my life. You're going to become my Tao partner and hold the wedding of the century with me. Have you forgotten all of that? You can't go back on your word. At this moment, the extremely independent woman was like a hesitant girl. Her body trembled as she cried incessantly and pleaded incessantly. Enlin opened his mouth, but he found that he was unable to say anything as he looked at the woman before him. He had never let anyone down in his life, but in the end, he still let Xiaolan down. He had even lost his essential life force, so he could no longer become the heavenly Tao with its own will and will. His heart jolted violently. Darkness suddenly swept through the entire sky, engulfing the entire continent. All of the cracks in the sky were filled up by darkness, and all of the chaotic turbulence was engulfed by darkness. All of the terrifying natural disasters were suppressed by darkness. Heaven and earth fell silent. All of the living beings raised their heads and looked up at the dark sky. They were not afraid in the slightest. Instead, they felt a sense of tranquility. Just a moment ago, they were still panicking as if doomsday had arrived. But now, all of their negative emotions have been soothed by the darkness before their eyes. What a gentle darkness! This thought involuntarily surfaced in the hearts of all living beings. The man in Su Xiaolan's arms suddenly became transparent and untouchable. No! Su Xiaolan was at a complete loss for words, and she tried to hug Enlin again, only to miss him again. Enlin felt as if everything before his eyes was fading away, and his body slowly flew into the sky in an uncontrollable manner. Master, big brotherin, Wolf, Master, don't leave us. Sect leader, everyone seemed to have realized something, and tears flowed from their eyes. Some of them even tried to persuade him to stay, but to no avail. Enlin's body continued to fly into the sky in an uncontrollable manner. It was also at this moment that light flashed from his ring. A peculiar black ball appeared between heaven and earth before exploding into the heavens, forming a peculiar connection with the Taichu continent and countless other worlds. This is the embryonic form of the heavenly Tao. I didn't think something like this would exist. Is Enlin unable to escape the fate of becoming the heavenly Tao after all? Chen Chen's expression was tinged with a hint of shock and dejection. Mending the heavens with his own body, using the 5 paramount beings to track down the earth, and using the 6 paramount beings to reforge the heavenly Tao. This is the most perfect method of mending the heavens, right? Aside from sacrificing his own life. Sigh, we don't need to do anything to mend the heavens. Niwa couldn't help but sigh upon seeing this. Is this Enlin's fate? Tao Lord Luya's expression was filled with disappointment as he realized that there was nothing he could do. Enlin recognized that peculiar black ball. It and the evil-slaying sword were both things that the heavenly darkness god had left behind for him in his previous life. However, he didn't know what the black ball was for, and he couldn't figure it out even after studying it for a long time. Now, he finally understood. The black ball was meant to sacrifice him to mend the heavens. Everything had been planned out, and Lin didn't have much of a reaction to this. Instead, he felt like this was quite a good idea. At the very least, it would ensure the success rate of the mending of the heavens, and he would die a worthy death. His body slowly drifted into the sky. Everything was leaving him. His power of Tao, his consciousness, and even his memories. He really couldn't bear to part with it. All of the people he was closest to gradually became blurry and illusionary. He didn't know if they were becoming blurry or indistinct, or if he was becoming blurry and indistinct. The woman in the jade dress tried to grab onto his hand with all her might, but she continued to stubbornly try. It was as if she had waited for 100 years and was determined to give up everything. Dubai's dog also pounced toward him, but he couldn't fly on it like before. A woman as beautiful as the moon flew toward him before passing through his body. A little red flower shone like the sun, as if it wanted to bring him back. But why was the light becoming weaker and weaker? Chio, who could only speak 4-word idioms, seemed to be able to speak other idioms, but he couldn't hear them clearly. And that big black dragon was so black, and Lin knew that all of his adorable companions couldn't bear to part with him. He had initially thought that death would be a very terrifying thing, but after seeing so many of his companions desperately trying to capture him, he suddenly felt very comforted, very relieved, and very peaceful. This life seemed to be a little too short for a true cultivator. However, Lin felt like this was a very fulfilling life. Just like that, he bid farewell to this world. His world fell into darkness. Chapter 2395. Slap. A crisp crack sounded. There was a faint numbness. Then there was a warm, soft, and smooth sensation. This was an extremely wonderful feeling, and Lin was suddenly jolted awake from his slumber. Giant Lin, I've caught you. A pleasant, clear voice sounded like the gentle murmur of a fairy. Lin abruptly opened his eyes to discover a fairy with long, golden hair and emerald green eyes holding tightly onto his hand while looking at him with a faint smile on her face. The memories that he had lost suddenly surged through his mind again. Little Na, how did you? And Lin discovered that his consciousness was gradually returning to him. He regained his sense of this world, and it was as if he had come back to life. Meanwhile, the young fairy before him had transformed into her human form. A dazzling divine light revolved around her flawless body. 9 heavenly books appeared around her, exuding an ethereal and transcendent aura. At the same time, the evil-slaying sword was drawn into Tina's hand by a burst of power. One of the heavenly books trembled violently before being extracted from the evil-slaying sword. This is the heavenly book of the heavenly light goddess. And Lin faltered slightly before seeing the 10 heavenly books quickly fuse together to form a white seed that quickly flew into the fairy's glabella. I command you in the name of the paramount goddess of the divine mirror world, Tina. I command you in the name of the light and darkness of the divine mirror world, the sky, the earth, the ocean of life, and everything in the divine mirror world. Countless crimson divine patterns suddenly appeared on Tina's pristine, jade-like skin, and her forehead was pressed tightly against Lin's forehead as tears welled up in her emerald eyes. Giant Lin, don't die. Her words pierced through Lin's soul and reached the deepest part of his heart. In that instant, the divine mirror appeared. Heaven and earth change. The mirror that hung over heaven and earth replaced all of the darkness in this world. This transformation happened far too quickly. So quickly that Lin didn't even have time to react. And Lin did not even know when he had completely lost the feeling of being connected to all things in the world. Previously, he already had the feeling of becoming the heavenly Tao, but now he had completely separated himself from the heavenly Tao and became an independent individual. Tina had transformed into the stunning holy fairy maiden and dragged Lin back to reality, sending countless beings on a roller coaster ride. Even Chun, Nuwa, the heavenly lord of Tao and virtue, and the other gods of creation were completely dumbstruck. What the hell happened? Even though they were used to seeing many strange things and had the most experience, they were still at a loss at this moment. Little Na, what's going on? What's wrong with you? And Lin could sense that the aura of the elven woman before him was becoming more and more ethereal. He could feel the warmth from the contact between their foreheads, as if a woman was giving him her blessing with all her might. It's nothing. Giant Lin, just let Little Na's shoulder some of the burden for you. Tina shook her head with a determined smile on her face. I know. You've always been curious about why my divine mirror world has changed so much, right? Little Na has always wanted to give you a perfect ending. I've waited for countless years. I've tried everything I could to change all of this. When I crossed the river of time and gave up everything to see you again, I was so happy. All of my previous efforts were worth it. Tears welled up in the elven woman's eyes. I came from the future, so I shouldn't have existed in this world. I've already drastically changed the structure of this world, and now it's time for me to repay all of my sins. And Lin was already struck by a sense of foreboding upon hearing this, and he gripped tightly onto the elven woman's soft, slender hand. What are you doing? Little Na, what are you trying to do? Tina forced a smile onto her face at the sight of Lin's panicked expression. Giant Lin, I've committed the most heinous crime in this world. Heaven and earth will definitely strip me of my existence. So the only place I can belong is to the heavenly Tao. Tina's body began to become illusionary as she spoke. No, no. And Lin's expression shifted drastically, and the terrifying thought in his mind finally erupted forth. He immediately made a grabbing motion toward Tina again, only to miss. He could only look on helplessly as the little fairy he had once relied on gradually became illusionary. Boundless horror began to spread through his body. This was a feeling that was even more agonizing than death. And Lin finally understood what Su Xiaolan was feeling. No, I'm your master. I command you not to sacrifice yourself for me. Get back here. And Lin roared at the top of his lungs. I can't go back. I made a mistake in the first place. The only way to eliminate karma is to become the heavenly Tao of this universe. I'm also more suited to become the heavenly Tao than you are. Tina bit down on her lower lip and shook her head stubbornly as she refused in Lin's command. The Tai Chu continent is a clone created with the ancient Tai Chu realm as its foundation, and I possess the incomplete heavenly Tao of the ancient Tai Chu realm. My divine mirror world was created with the ancient Tai Chu realm as its base, so I've already made all the necessary preparations. No one is more suited to become the heavenly Tao than I am. Flowing Gold, Blackstone, Emotu, Tian E, and the three living beings also seem to have been drawn toward Tina as their bodies also began to become illusionary. I'm sorry, but you followed a very selfish god of creation. Tina looked at the 5 gods of creation with a remorseful expression. We'll support all of our goddess decisions. Flowing Gold chuckled. Blackstone bowed. It's my honor to be able to serve our goddess. This is my home, Tian E said in a faint voice. There was no resentment or sorrow on the 3 living beings' faces. Instead, smiles appeared on their faces. Perhaps we'll be able to live a better life after becoming the heavenly Tao. Mou Dong. The 5 gods of creation disappeared. No one knew if they had gone to the divine mirror world or merged with the heavenly Tao. Tina's body became more and more illusionary, and her aura quickly dissipated, only to be replaced by the complete and all-encompassing heavenly Tao. Don't do this, I beg you, little Na. Don't do this. And Lin chased after Tina's illusionary figure with all his might, but he was completely unable to catch her. She was like a fairy dancing through a forest, leaving no trace of her to be found. The fairy stared intently at the white-robed man, and she felt as if she had returned to the time when this man had violently barged into her kingdom and flaunted his wealth in front of her, making her heart tremble in fear. A smile appeared on Tina's face as her body disappeared into the sky. However, her voice was as pleasant as flowing water, and it traveled into Lin's ears. Goodbye, Giant Lin. It was you who took me to see the world. I wish for you to continue living in such a beautiful world. Farewell forever. Chapter 2396. The 10th year of the Divine Mirror Era. The continent that had just experienced an earth-shattering calamity was once again filled with vitality. Lush greenery reappeared on the shattered earth. The blue sky was once again cleansed. Countless living beings were born. Birds, beasts, and insects chirped as a warm breeze swept through heaven and earth. Heaven and earth were being reborn. An epical wedding had taken place. This was not the century that normal people knew of. Instead, it was the century of the universe. This was the first wedding to take place after the Tai Chu universe became the Divine Mirror universe. And it was definitely an unprecedented super wedding. In the instant that the wedding of the century took place, the starry sky projection radiated across the entire universe, and a rainbow light illuminated the heavens. All living beings in the realm of stars could see colorful clouds when they looked up at the blue sky during the day, and they could see the moon at night. Not only that, but almost all of them received a message in their minds, which was that Lin and Su Xiaolan were going to get married. This was a message from the will of the universe, the will of the divine mirror heavenly Tao. That's right, the main characters of this wedding of the century were Lin and Su Xiaolan. And Lin had promised to give Su Xiaolan a wedding of the century. To be honest, Su Xiaolan didn't think that her wedding would be so grand. She wanted nothing more than to tell all of the living beings in the universe that Lin was going to marry Su Xiaolan and that they were going to be together for the rest of their lives. A joyous atmosphere spread throughout the entire universe. Not only was the entire Divine Mirror continent a sea of joy, but all of the living beings in the realm of stars were also genuinely happy. In particular, when they learned that the main characters of this wedding were the legendary divine maiden of God of creation and the man who had just saved the universe, all of them screamed with excitement. In the sky above the Divine Mirror continent, vermilion birds flew through the sky from time to time, leaving a trail of dazzling fireworks in their wake, as if they had dyed the entire sky a series of rainbows. Countless true dragons revolved in the sky, releasing boundless, auspicious energy. Immortal beasts and mythological beasts were already nothing new. Even Tao, integration stage, super mighty figures had never seen so many top-rate auspicious beasts, let alone normal cultivators. Even Tao integration stage, super mighty figures had never seen so many auspicious beasts in their lives. One legendary god of creation after another appeared on this continent before rushing toward Lin and Su Xiaolan's wedding. This was a joyous occasion of extraordinary significance, and all the big shots would give face. Even the Void Spirit tribe, the Blood tribe, the Western Dragon tribe, and the other tribes that had once been enemies all offered congratulatory gifts in an obedient manner. Of course, if Lin didn't invite them, they wouldn't dare to go. But that didn't stop them from enthusiastically pulling up banners, setting off firecrackers, and holding region-wide celebrations. Their flattering looks made it seem as if they would go through fire and water as long as Lin gave the order. As for the powers that were on friendly terms with the 4-9 Immortal sect, they were even more ecstatic. Some soul formation stage and return to void stage powerful beings were even given tickets to attend the wedding, which gave them the right to brag to others. Friends like Zhao Huayin and Lu Debao were also given the best seats at the wedding, and even some return to void stage mighty figures were extremely envious of them. Even those who didn't have a chance to attend the wedding gathered in front of the live stream screens to watch the live broadcast. This was a live broadcast to the entire universe. The wedding was about to take place. The entire Purple Star State had become an ocean of joy for the mighty figures. The 4-9 Immortal sect had become the #1 sect in the entire universe. All of the sect disciples were full of energy and elation as they worked on all of the details of the wedding. Within the territory of the 4-9 Immortal sect, on the boundless fallen Phoenix grasslands. If he were to throw a random brick, he would probably hit a big shot in the cultivation world. On this grassland, any random adorable little beast could be an ancient return to void stage immortal beast or Tao integration stage mythological beast. As for God of creation stage beings, they were the most powerful beings no matter where they went, so they naturally had special resting areas for their guests. The Celestial Court, the Vermilion Bird sect, the Mythological Beast sect, the Heavenly Sword sect, the 10,000 Spirits Immortal sect, and the Purple Star Imperial family were all invited. Aside from that, the Buddhist Kingdom, the West Sea Alliance, the Holy Realm of Bliss, the Dragon Court of the Eastern Seas, and the Pill Tower were also invited. The elderly Dragon King of the Dragon Court of the Eastern Seas was the happiest of all. Su Xiaolan was related to their dragon tribe by blood. Even though there had been some conflict in the past, and this dazzling goddess had always been lukewarm toward them, she had at least sent an invitation to the Dragon Palace of the Eastern Seas. Her change in attitude had made the Dragon Tribe of the Eastern Seas very happy for a very long time. For this wedding, the entire AO Dragon Tribe was mobilized to witness the most powerful being in the entire Dragon Tribe. This was the glory of their entire tribe, as well as the object of their worship. Their friend from Earth were the most astonished. Tian Lingling, UMO, the savior Dongfang Shui, and the other cultivators all received invitations and arrived at the 4-9 Immortal Sect, where they were immediately dumbstruck by the grandiose scene before them. This was even more of a shock than coming to a big city from the countryside. It was like coming to a civilized world from a primitive society. What did it mean to be the center of the universe? What did it mean to be worshipped by 1,000 gods and immortals? This was the center of the universe. Any one of these mighty figures could dominate an entire realm and become their teacher. And Ming Chuan wanted to see his son get married even in his dreams. Now his son was finally getting married. However, he suddenly discovered that his heart wasn't feeling very well. This was the first time he had experienced something like this ever since he had entered the cultivation world. Never would he have thought that he would be able to sit at the same table as the Tao Patriarch, the heavenly lord of Tao and virtue, and that Niwa was pouring tea for him with a dainty smile on her face. This was something that he didn't even dare to dream about. It really did happen, and Ming Chuan wanted to yell out loud, "My son is so bad *SS." At this moment, the wedding had already begun to heat up. The 9-color divine vermilion bird rained down a shower of dazzling feathers from the sky. All of the mythological beasts and celestial maidens had already taken their positions. Big sisters, let's practice the heavenly feather immortal fate dance again. We can't afford to make any mistakes during the wedding, and we have to make sure that our Tao realm is perfectly integrated with our bodies. Lin Junjun beckoned to her big sisters as they stepped onto the stage again to rehearse the best dance in the celestial court. All of the celestial maidens yelled in agreement as they continued to rehearse. The celestial arch looked at his 7 excited daughters, and he was both elated and a little unhappy at the same time. Humph, these useless cheese. He wasn't even as diligent as they were now during his birthday banquet. So be it if they were giving money to Enlin in the past. At least they were giving him a good meal. But why were they so diligent now? Emperor Qinghua also stroked his beard with a smile. These little girls sure are hard-working. It's not like they're the main dancers for this wedding. I feel like they're going to be the main dancers, so they're practicing with all their might. The celestial the arch pursed his lips. It can't be helped. The sun and moon splendor dance prepared by Xiao Hong of the 4-9 Immortal Sect and Chang Yi of the Moon Palace is simply too spectacular. Emperor Ziwei sighed with emotion. Almost all of the most powerful beings in the universe will be attending the wedding. Even if they're not the main dancers, just being able to show their faces at an event like this is a great opportunity for them. So don't be angry. Emperor Tian Huang was clearly in a good mood today. Emperor Shang nodded in agreement. That's right. This wedding is an extremely important event for all of us. Let's cherish this precious time. Just as the emperors were chatting with one another, a woman in a red dress with a voluptuous figure was riding a giant snail that looked like gold and jade as they slowly crawled toward the viewing platform. Viewing platform, quality inspection, perfect. Platform of blessings and vows, perfect. Every single one of Enlin's criteria has been met. The huge snail wagged its head as it spoke. Holy Lord Tianhua, let's go do another round of inspections. The woman in a red dress smiled and said, "This is the first major project we've undertaken, so we have to make it a benchmark project. With so many powerful beings present, it'll be a great way to promote our work." Of course, Holy Lord Tian waved its feelers. The number 1 architect of the Taichu continent was inspecting all of the projects diligently. At the core area of the viewing platform, a girl with long dark green hair, orange eyes, and extremely exuberant life force was glancing around uneasily. She was so beautiful that it was almost unreal. She didn't know why Lin had set his eyes on her, and he was talking about some secret deal where he would take a portion of the paramount heavenly Tao and reincarnate on his own. After that, he kidnapped her and sent a little turtle girl to keep an eye on her at all times. Beside her, there was a bunch of beast pets bustling about. Dabai stuck out his tongue as he and Shui Zhantian looked on at all of the supreme-grade celestial maidens. Wow, this one's so pretty. What a great figure, woof. Wah, this one's got a great pair of eyes. Woof, woof. Dabai had never seen so many beautiful women of different styles before, and he lay on the ground with his tongue hanging out of his mouth, unwilling to leave. Shui Zhantian wasn't acting like Dabai. He was currently flapping his little wings and chanting phrases such as a match made in heaven, a happy family, one heart and one heart, a perfect match, 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 and so on. The clown's eyes twinkled like a phantom searchlight, shining here and there, making the atmosphere of the wedding more lively and exciting. The exquisitely beautiful Bai Yao was snuggling up against Xiao Chou. One was extremely beautiful, while the other was extremely ugly, and they attracted a lot of attention. A sweet-looking woman in a colorful dress was handing out wedding candies to all of the guests on a platter. She was Lin's beast pet, Little Goo. Of course, she had to refer to her as Little Kai now. As for the underworld Dao flower, Little Mushroom, who had joined the beast pet team last, all had different expressions on its 99 petals, but all of its petals were baring its fangs as it smiled at all of the guests. For some reason, all of the guests were filled with happiness upon seeing its smiling face. And Lin's servants were in an even greater hurry. Merlin, Cassidy, Tobias, and the other blood tribe cultivators took on the role of bartenders. The triplets, Jean Ling, Jean Yao, and Ada, were dressed in sexy and adorable little golden dresses, singing joyful songs in a joyful and pleasant voice. Dong Gua and the white-scaled wolf god acted as errand boys and were responsible for leading the way. As for the demonic frost star, it was responsible for transporting goods and people as it floated through the sky. And Lin's 3 beloved disciples weren't slacking off either. Xiao Zhe and Xiao Tu took on all of the dragon dance duties and led the true dragons of the Azure Dragon tribe through the sky with pearls in their mouths, creating quite a spectacle to behold. Yiling had also changed from her usual tight-fitting black Taoist robe into an extremely beautiful floral dress. Her hair was tied up in a ponytail, and she had a pair of bright eyes and a vibrant smile on her face. She was the epitome of a girl next door, and she welcomed all of her friends from Earth with open arms. She was extremely approachable, and the tension in the hearts of all of her friends and family on Earth was alleviated a little. In reality, the 4-9 Immortal sect wasn't lacking in manpower. Servants, beast pets, disciples. Countless lackeys would be willing to do the job at the drop of a hat. However, they were not like Sir System, who did nothing, because this was the wedding of the person they liked the most. They needed a sense of participation, and they liked doing this kind of thing. If anyone tried to steal their job, they would end up fighting them instead. Wow, look at that guy. He's so handsome. Who is he? A celestial maiden from the realm of stars was greeted by the sight of a handsome and gentle male cultivator in a Taoist robe, and her heart jolted with excitement. The male cultivator seemed to be the face of the human guests, and his smile was extremely infectious. Stop dreaming. He's the pavilion lord of the 4-9 Immortal Sect's Spirit Pavilion, Xian Yuan Cheng. Do you see that woman with the best figure over there? She's Xian Yuan Cheng's Dao partner, Shu Hongyi. A female cultivator whispered to the celestial maiden. Sigh. She's taken. The celestial maiden heaved a forlorn sigh. As expected, the male cultivators of the 4-9 Immortal Sect were all very popular. She had to be careful even if she had the right to be infatuated with them. With this in mind, she couldn't help but think back to the most sought-after man in the entire universe. He was also going to be taken today. However, everyone felt like this was the best outcome. No one dared to question this, and no one had the confidence to think that they were worthy of him. And Lin and Su Xiaolan were truly a match made in heaven. It could be said that Xian Yuan Cheng was 100% a male cultivator. Just by standing there, he was able to attract countless pairs of eyes. If it weren't for Shu Hongyi, Xin Yuancheng would most likely have already encountered countless celestial maidens trying to flirt with him and beg for voice transmission talismans. I'm so envious of Xin Yuancheng. He already has a Dao partner, but he's still able to attract so much attention. Tang Shimin sighed with melancholy at the sight of all the female cultivators casting sidelong glances at Xin Yuancheng. Wang Xuanzhan patted Tang Shimin's shoulder with a resolute expression. You don't have to be a woman to cultivate. Tang Shimin, but I'm very lonely. A man is fine too. Wang Xuanzhan spoke with a solemn expression. Tang Shimin's expression gradually turned from confusion to shock. He struggled free from Wang Xuanzhan's hand on his shoulder and quickly fled into the distance. Senior student Wang, please spare me. Wang Xuanzhan's expression darkened. What are you talking about? I'm talking about brotherly love. Hot-blooded brotherly love can also soothe the emptiness in one's heart. All right, you're right. I suddenly remembered that I have something urgent to attend to, so I'll be taking my leave. Tang Shimin disappeared in the blink of an eye, leaving behind a dark expression on Wang Xuanzhan's face. Come. Everyone, the wedding is about to begin. The ancient dragon empress called out to the members of the heaven-crushing sect, and they all made their way to the excellent viewing platform. Chun Chun and Shui Yin were also present, and they were all seated at the same table. Shui Yin blushed, and she glanced at Chun Chun from time to time. However, Chun Chun had a serious expression on his face as he watched the performance in the distance. Time passed by slowly. Boom, 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 boom. Firecrackers sounded. At the same time, balls of dazzling ice and fire suddenly exploded in the sky. The firework of ice and fire set off a wave of excitement at the wedding venue. Led by Shangguan Yi, Meng Ji, and Yin Hua, several hundred snow maidens danced in the air. As their blue sleeves danced in the air, countless beautiful ice flowers blossomed, creating a breathtaking spectacle. Several hundred disciples of the Vermilion Bird sect, including Mo Hai, Lan Yin, Yang Yuan, and Lu Jiaji, unleashed a series of multicolored flowers of fire, which intertwined with the ice flowers. Both sides created an extremely spectacular spectacle of ice and fire in the air. This was also a symbolic scene in which the two powers had turned from enemies to allies. The ice matriarch was a legendary god of creation, and she was performing on the stage in person. All of the guests were in awe as they truly experienced the extravagance of the 4-9 immortal sect. Shangguan Yi stood gracefully in the clouds, and her long blue dress fluttered in the wind. She was like a fairy that had emerged from the snow, and she waved the scepter in her hand. Her bright blue eyes looked into the distance, and a mesmerizing smile appeared on her face. Next, let us welcome the sect leader of the 4-9 immortal sect, the star of today's wedding, the groom, and Lin, onto the stage. Upon hearing this, the entire venue erupted into an uproar. Regardless of whether they were normal cultivators or mighty figures, all of them rose to their feet and applauded with sincerity and enthusiasm. Some of the celestial maidens even screamed with excitement. In the center of the wedding venue, there was an extremely holy and beautiful platform of blessing and vows. Under the gazes of tens of thousands of people, a man slowly descended on a 7-colored cloud. He was none other than the groom of the wedding, Enlin. Enlin wore a bright red robe that symbolized auspiciousness and joy, as well as an intricate black immortal hat with golden patterns on it. He stood tall and straight, and there was a warm and expectant smile on his handsome face. A rare hint of shyness appeared on his face at the sight of so many people cheering for him. Look, Your Majesty, that's your underling. He even saved the universe. Impressive, isn't he? Lu Qianhuan wore a blue and white magical maiden costume, and she held onto the hand of an exquisitely beautiful woman with a crown on her head as she spoke with a smile. So impressive. Who would have thought that I would accept a super powerful being as my underling? The little girl smacked her lips in disbelief at the sight of the man who was unimaginably dazzling. However, a smile appeared on her face as she recalled the final farewell that the man had given her. The seven celestial maidens began to perform a dance that they had meticulously prepared next to a holy path outside of the platform of blessings and vows. The spirit maiden and Tion stood off to the side, performing heavenly music and singing a song that was capable of conjuring countless phenomena between heaven and earth. Large, auspicious symbols began to appear in the sky above the divine mirror continent and all of the other worlds. The wedding had officially begun. Let's welcome the bride, Su Xiaolan, to the stage, Shangguan Yi announced in a loud voice. The cries of dragons and phoenixes erupted in unison. Xiao Zhe and Little Huang danced in the air with all their might. The most beautiful flower petals fell from the sky like rain. And Lin stood on the divine blessing platform and looked down at the extravagant path that extended all the way to the bridal chamber. He flicked his finger, and a red line appeared on the ring finger of his left hand. The red line then slowly slithered down the platform and down the extravagant path before entering the bridal chamber. It was as if the two of them were connected by fate. One party had already sent out his red line and was waiting for the other party's response. At that moment, no one seemed to care about the dragon and phoenix or the dance anymore. Everyone was staring at the red line nervously. Within the bridal chamber, the woman was staring blankly at her own makeup in the mirror. Today, she was very, very beautiful. There was no woman more beautiful than her in this world. However, she was still very nervous and uneasy. What if Lin didn't like the way she was dressed? Was this makeup really perfect? Was there anything that could be improved upon? Is it really done? Su Xiaolan murmured to herself. I swear on my most perfect human personality that there are no mistakes. Bai Ling vowed. There's no need to doubt that you are the most beautiful woman in the entire universe. Su Xiaolan's eyes trembled slightly upon hearing this, and she swallowed lightly in an attempt to dispel some of her nervousness. She discovered that she was extremely nervous. She had thought that everything was ready, but her heart was still beating very quickly. Even though her every frown and smile could mesmerize all living beings, and her heaven-defying beauty could cover up all of her flaws, she was still extremely unconfident. Her fingers were as white as the tips of onions, and she gently stroked her face, which was even whiter than the moonlight. She blinked her eyes lightly, and her gaze was enough to stir up the deepest ripples in one's heart. She had a phoenix coronet, red lips, and pearly white teeth. Indeed, her beauty was flawless. At this moment, a red line slowly extended in from outside the door and stopped beside Su Xiaolan's finger. It even gently curled around the red line, as if it was begging for a hook. A smile involuntarily appeared on Su Xiaolan's face upon seeing this. If anyone else were to see that smile, they would probably be dazzled once again. It's time to go out. Bai Ling also smiled. Su Xiaolan nodded slightly before wrapping the red line around the ring finger of her left hand. She took a deep breath before turning to look at the fluttering red curtain. There was a man waiting for her on the other side of the curtain. And Lin should be very nervous as well, right? She imagined Lin's nervous expression. Su Xiaolan pursed her lips into a smile as a boundless warmth appeared in her eyes. She stood up and walked toward the door. A tsunami of cheers suddenly erupted at the wedding venue. Su Xiaolan parted the red curtain and appeared before everyone. A smile appeared on her face as she looked at the man on the platform. Their eyes met, and both of their hearts skipped a beat. And Lin was also smiling, but the rims of his eyes had turned red. Su Xiaolan repressed her surging emotions and told herself that she couldn't cry. If she did, her makeup would be ruined. She definitely couldn't cry during the happiest and most beautiful moment of her life. Her footsteps were light and heavy, and she made her way toward Lin under the blessings of countless living beings as heavenly music and iridescent light shone down from the sky. At this moment, the red line was connected to both of their ring fingers. The red line became shorter and shorter, and the two of them drew closer and closer. Even though there were celestial maidens dancing in the sky and countless immortal beasts unleashing their divine lights, none of them could overshadow Su Xiaolan's beauty. Su Xiaolan's beauty was simply too breathtaking at this moment. All of the female cultivators' hearts began to race, and some of them even forgot to breathe. This was definitely a peerless divine maiden who could mesmerize countless living beings. However, in the eyes of the divine maiden, there was only Enlin. She stared at the man on the platform, and her footsteps didn't falter as translucent tears flowed from her eyes, staining the red carpet beneath her feet. She had promised not to cry, but it had only been a short while since she had been humiliated in front of the entire universe. Lon Xiaonie stood off to the side of the road, blowing dreamy bubbles into the air with the bubble stick that Enlin had given her, making the scene even more romantic and beautiful. Tears also welled up in many people's eyes at the sight of Su Xiaolan's tears. Su Qingyun was sobbing uncontrollably. She had witnessed everything that the two of them had gone through, and she knew how difficult it had been for them to reach this point. She also knew how beautiful and desirable this was. Before they knew it, Su Xiaolan had already made her way over to Enlin, and she latched onto his hand along the red line. Their fingers intertwined, and the red line fused into their hands. Everyone erupted into a tsunami of cheers and blessings. Su Xiaolan and Enlin looked at each other with deep emotions in their eyes, and their hands were tightly intertwined. Their bodies were so beautiful and harmonious, and they were like a beautiful painting. Shangguani descended from the sky and continued to act as the MC. After all, the ceremony still had to go through. Never in her life would she have thought that someone as unlucky as herself would be able to act as the MC for such a grand wedding. This was a huge show of trust. Shangguani took this very seriously, and after saying a few words to warm up the atmosphere, they finally entered the most important part of the ceremony, which was the ceremony. That's right, even for immortals, this was still a very important part of the ceremony. Shangguani cleared her throat with a solemn expression. May the bride and groom please begin the ceremony. The first bow to heaven and earth. Enlin and Su Xiaolan both turned toward a certain direction upon hearing this. In front of the platform of blessing and oath, there was an exquisitely beautiful fairy looking at the two of them with a vibrant smile on her face. The fairy realized that the two of them were about to bow to her, and her golden wings flapped as she tried to put on a dignified expression on her face. That's right, she was Tina, the Tina who had once been willing to become the heavenly Tao for Enlin. However, she didn't die. When she became the heavenly Tao, she took a different route and kicked the paramount power of the heavenly earth god to Enlin. She then used the divine mirror heavenly Tao to forcefully replace the heavenly Tao of Tai Chu in order to maintain her sense of self and successfully become the paramount heavenly Tao with a complete life force. All of this was thanks to the power of her divine mirror world and the complete heavenly book of the ancient Tai Chu realm. Tina was creating a new universe and an unprecedented miracle. She had surpassed all of the gods of creation's myths and even destroyed the absolute beginning barrier set up by Pangu. If it weren't for her, their marriage wouldn't have caused such a massive stir in this universe. This was all due to her selfishness and willfulness. It was all thanks to her that Enlin and Su Xiaolan were able to make it this far. As such, they were extremely willing to bow to her. The two of them held hands and bowed deeply to the fairy before them in unison. Tina instantly panicked, and her heart was in a complete mess. Master is bowing to a beast pet? No, even though it feels good. That doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense. With this in mind, Tina hurriedly bowed to Enlin and Su Xiaolan right before the eyes of countless living beings. All of the living beings present, including the gods of creation, were dumbstruck. Holy F***CK. What was going on? Tina also bowed to Enlin and Su Xiaolan. When others bow to heaven and earth, they really do so. Now, Enlin and Su Xiaolan are bowing to heaven and earth. And not only did heaven and earth manifest itself for them to bow to, it even turned around and bowed to them. I have to say, this is really amazing. Tao Lord Luya was starting to feel like Enlin was a powerful being that he couldn't afford to mess with. Enlin and Su Xiaolan were both stunned by Tina's reaction. Tina also stared at them with a hint of embarrassment and unease in her eyes. Something doesn't seem right. Did I screw up? Ha ha ha. And Lin was the first to burst into laughter. Wah! Jine and Lin, big sister Xiaolan. I'm so sorry, I haven't recovered yet. So how can I bow to you? This is too much of a test for my heart. Tina pouted with an apologetic and aggrieved expression. Hey, what are you talking about? Su Xiaolan stroked Tina's soft, golden hair with a smile. We bow to each other, and you bow to each other. It's all right. Tina blinked innocently before nodding in a daze. That does make sense. The three of them then looked at each other before bursting into laughter. Everyone understood each other's feelings as they looked at each other. Everything was still the same as before. How nice. Second bow to your parents. Shangguan Yi spoke with a smile, but her heart was filled with indignation and self-blame. Something really did go wrong. It's all my fault. And Lin and Su Xiaolan held hands as they turned to Ming Chuan and Zhu Shuza, who were sitting on the platform of blessings and vows, and they bowed deeply again. And Ming Chuan and Zhu Shuza's eyes were both red as they nodded with smiles on their faces. To be honest, they had watched Lin and Su Xiaolan grow up, and they couldn't help but sigh with emotion at the sight of such a young child getting married. In their eyes, Lin wasn't the #1 war god of the universe, and Su Xiaolan wasn't a peerless goddess of god of creation with two essential essences. This pair of newlyweds were just children that they had watched grow up, and it was very, very good that they were able to reap their own blessings. Bow to each other, husband and wife, Shangguan Yi announced in a loud voice. The sun and moon hung high in the sky at the same time. Blue sky, white clouds, and a sea of stars appeared at the same time. And Lin and Su Xiaolan looked at each other, and they could see the happiness and anticipation in each other's eyes. Forever together, Tao and eternity. The two of them bowed deeply to each other as Xiao Hong and Chong. He performed their sun and moon shining together dance. The agreement they had made with each other, the agreement that they had made in 100 years, was now complete. This bow was imbued with Lin and Su Xiaolan's boundless blessings and vows toward each other. It was truly a blessing to have met someone like this in this life. Both the wedding guests and all of the spectators watching the live stream. At this moment, applause and cheers erupted into the heavens again. Countless sincere blessings and countless envious gazes converged upon this perfect couple. A sweet smile appeared on Shangguan Yi's face. It had finally come to a perfect conclusion. Everything had gone very smoothly. At this moment, a crisp voice sounded. Kiss! Kiss! Tina suddenly yelled with excitement. Even the heavens had come out to start the ball rolling, and all of the guests also began to yell, Kiss, kiss! You're a puppy if you don't kiss, woof! Dubai roared with excitement, and many of the onlookers burst into laughter. And Lin also heard Dubai's words, and he couldn't help but burst into laughter. You're a puppy if you don't kiss. That's all right, and Lin would definitely kiss you. At least that was what everyone was thinking. However, and Lin suddenly yelled, Woof, woof! At this moment, the raucous atmosphere suddenly fell completely silent. Why was he barking like a dog? He wouldn't kiss the bride, even if he was a dog. The rabbit maiden was just squawking when she suddenly fell silent. Dubai was also dumbstruck. What the hell was going on? Shangguan Yi was on the verge of tears. What was Lin doing? Was he going to cancel the wedding? She didn't know how to deal with a situation like this. Wah, it's all my fault. I shouldn't have been the MC. Su Xiaolan faltered slightly upon seeing Lin's gentle expression, and for some reason, she suddenly thought back to the first time they had met outside Xiaoxian United University. Both of them were full of youthful energy and were full of anticipation for the future. Lin was a noob. Su Xiaolan was a sunshine girl. The two of them had met for the first time in the best of times, and the awkwardness of not being able to speak the same language. Lin suddenly barked, woof woof, and Su Xiaolan thought she had encountered a dog demon. That was the beginning of their story. Neither of them realized it at the time. They were going to be the ones who would spend the rest of their lives with each other. This was a little secret between the two of them. Time flew by, and everything felt like it had happened yesterday. That was the beginning of everything. Now, a new life had begun between them at the wedding. Everyone was at a loss for what to do. However, a sweet smile appeared on Su Xiaolan's face. She understood what Enlin meant, and her voice became extremely gentle. Woof woof. Everyone's jaws dropped. I love you too, dog demon, husband. The woman closed her eyes, raised her red lips, and kissed the man in front of her deeply. At this moment, it became eternal. Chapter 2397. The 100th year of the Divine Mirror Era. Enlin and Su Xiaolan lived a blissful life as Dao partners, and 90 years passed by in the blink of an eye. During these 90 years, Cassidy, Long Aoyin, Shui Zhantian, and even Bai Ling, the most perfect human, began to cultivate diligently and successfully reach the Dao integration pinnacle stage in just a few decades. Enlin had nothing better to do, and he even refined a body for the blood patriarch skeleton, Xuan Mengmeng, so that it could adapt to this world and progress to the realm of creation. Thus, another god of creation was added to the 4-9 immortal sect. The rabbit maiden was unable to resist the temptation of being a bodyguard for 100 years, and she was tricked by Enlin into joining the 4-9 immortal sect for some reason. After some careful calculations, the 4-9 immortal sect now had over 2 digits of god of creation stage combat prowess. Su Xiaolan, Enlin, Shangguan Yi, the blood patriarch Blackstone, Mou, flowing gold, Tian Yi, the 3 living beings Xiaohong, Bai Ling, as well as the god of creation stage Tina. The 4-9 immortal sect had secured its position as the number 1 sect in the universe. And the miracles of this sect were still continuing. Jine and Lin, big sister Xiaolan, hurry up. The auspicious day that I've calculated for you is almost here. Tina wore a light green dress, and her skin was translucent under the sunlight. She clasped her hands behind her back as she looked at the two of them with a dainty smile on her face. All right, I'm going to experience that feeling of pushing my limits again. And Lin sat down on the platform with a hint of nervousness on his face, but there was also a hint of eagerness on his face. Su Xiaolan opened her eyes, and a faint smile appeared on her face. I'm ready. My wife, why are you so awesome? Didn't you already know that I'm awesome? Su Xiaolan raised her brows. What are you two talking about? Tina blushed with indignation. That's right, so many people are watching. And Lin could not help but blush as he looked at his friends and family, as well as the big shots who were ready to cheer for him. I've already used a barrier spell. No one can hear us, Su Xiaolan said confidently. And Lin looked at Tina. Why can Lil not hear us? Both of them suddenly fell silent. Tina's blush deepened, and she pretended to be oblivious as she looked up into the sky. And Lin, what are they talking about? Why are all 3 of them blushing all of a sudden? Little Red shook her bright red head and asked curiously. You don't understand, Woof. A grin appeared onto Bai's face. They're obviously talking about cultivation. You blush when talking about cultivation? Yi Ling was a little surprised. Of course they do. There are conflicts of opinion in cultivation as well, and there are times when they have heated debates, especially when it comes to sensitive topics. Woof. Dabai explained with a serious expression. Oh. Yi Ling nodded with a hint of understanding. What's the point of arguing so much? Let's just do it. Transcend the 9 heavens and ascend to the heavens. Master is so bad, *SS, so her journey after transcending will be boundless. Shui Zhantian flapped his little wings with excitement on his face. He was no longer talking about destroying the heavens. After all, the paramount heavenly Tao was Tina, so he couldn't destroy his own people. I hope classmate Lin and classmate Su Xiaolan can both transcend successfully. Su Qianyun put her palms together. Don't worry, with the blessings of the paramount heavens, they will definitely succeed. Xin Yuan Cheng was not concerned in the slightest, with a wide smile on his face. The news that Lin and Su Xiaolan were going to transcend to a higher level created another massive stir across the entire continent. All of the living beings had a feeling that no one would be able to stop the two of them from creating a miracle. Su Xiaolan had transcended at the Dao integration pinnacle stage, but she had given up on that for Enlin. After progressing to the God of Creation stage, She had communicated with Tina and Enlin to find a way to transcend. This was Enlin's first time, but he was no ordinary cultivator either. He possessed the complete powers of the six paramount heavenly Tao of the Tai Chu continent, and after close to 100 years, he had even combined them to form the complete heavenly Tao of the Tai Chu continent. Even though the Tai Chu continent's heavenly Tao had been kicked away by Tina, its heavenly Tao had not diminished. Enlin was only at the Tao integration pinnacle stage, but he was able to possess a complete heavenly Tao. This was equivalent to laying the noblest and most powerful egg without a chicken, and he was even more powerful than Tina. Enlin was most likely only one heaven-splitting technique away from Tina. This was also an opportunity for him to transcend. I'm ready as well. Enlin took a deep breath before turning to Tina. All right, I wish you the best of luck. Tina smiled as an extremely dazzling golden divine light erupted from her eyes, which enshrouded Enlin and Su Xiaolan. In the name of the divine mirror god of creation, I bestow upon Enlin and Su Xiaolan the highest blessings. Enlin and Su Xiaolan felt as if the entire universe was helping them. Su Xiaolan's body burst forth from the azure dragon and vermilion bird before piercing through the heavenly Tao and entering an ethereal realm. Azure dragon, vermilion bird, dual essence, see-through truth. Enlin raised his inky black, evil-slaying sword high into the air before slashing it down toward the sky. Tai Chu creation, heaven splitting. A phenomenon that stunned the entire continent appeared. Enlin and Su Xiaolan's bodies gradually became insubstantial, and their auras soared explosively to an unimaginable level before countless living beings bore witness to this. Their auras became ethereal and ethereal as they slowly disappeared on the spot. Within the divine mirror universe, above the paramount heavenly Tao, a boundless and indescribable Tao. The two of them held hands as they walked side by side. Beneath their feet were billions of stars, and this was a multiverse with infinite possibilities and boundless excitement. Enlin and Su Xiaolan came to a sudden realization as they appeared on the Tao. This Tao was known as the truth. The two of them continued onward like this. All of a sudden, they caught sight of three ethereal and transcendent figures standing in a circle. Beneath their feet was a boundless starry sky, and they were using the universe as their chess pieces and all living beings as their chess pieces. Oh, are there new transcendent beings here? An indescribable blue being with countless galactic tentacles on its body spoke with an intrigued expression. There's a pair of them right away. A monster with 9 heads and a sinister and warped body exuding a terrifying aura spoke with a hint of astonishment. A white-feathered whale-like being exuding a holy light that was powerful enough to encompass an entire universe narrowed its pure white eyes. This being is human? I've seen a person before, and he's also a transcendent being. Hee. Hurry up and tell us how you guys transcended. The indescribable blue being became extremely friendly. My name is Meng Qi. The fierce-looking one is called Tao Ancestor 9 Elements, and the easygoing one is called He Gemin by Luo. Enlin and Su Xiaolan glanced at each other before walking toward the three figures. In order to express their friendliness, the three figures first introduced themselves. My name is Meng Qi. In the paramount primordial universe, I comprehended the essence of the void and instantly transformed all of the void into singularities. I transcended the original heavenly Tao and successfully became a transcendent being. Meng Qi introduced himself with a cheerful smile. Enlin and Su Xiaolan were astonished. This was definitely a ruthless character. If he transformed all of the void into singularities, what would happen to the living beings of that universe? At this moment, the fierce-looking Tao Ancestor 9 Elements said, I'm Tao Ancestor 9 Elements. I cultivated the blood battle origin and defeated the original supreme universe's god of creation to the point of being autistic. I saved the living beings of the entire universe who were constantly being reared as nutrients and successfully transcended. Enlin swallowed his saliva. This fellow who looked like a living villain was actually a universe-level savior? Was he really that powerful? The white-feathered whale-like being said with an ethereal and clear voice, "I'm he Jimin by Luo. I cultivated the great redemption origin and once transformed all the living beings of more than 10 universes into the most perfect whale race. I saved countless lives and finally created a supreme universe. I found a truth and successfully transcended." Lin and Su Xiaolan both took a deep breath. What kind of truth was this? Su Xiaolan thought to herself for a moment before replying, "I'm called the Divine Phoenix Maiden because I perfected the Azure Dragon origin and the Vermilion Bird origin and transcended." The three supreme beings' eyes widened as they drew a sharp intake of breath. Dual origin? Are you serious? How can there be dual origin in this world? Su Xiaolan smiled but didn't say anything. She didn't respond to their astonishment. The three supreme beings had all realized that Su Xiaolan was no ordinary being. They couldn't help but turn toward Lin as a hint of respect appeared in their voices. "Fellow Taoist, what kind of origin do you possess? How did you attain Tao?" Lin blinked as he recalled his own cultivation journey. "Me? I don't have an origin." The three supreme beings were astonished again. You can transcend without an origin. From a cultivation perspective, this doesn't make sense. Why is that? Lin smiled upon hearing this. Why, perhaps. I'm a false immortal. End of the book.